The events are taking place in the Donghai University building, where quite a number of students have already gathered. Linmu thought hard about his test paper and complained that it was too difficult. At that moment, a group of girls entered the classroom and immediately attracted attention. The students immediately recognized one of them and started discussing how cute she was, causing everyone to think this student was the queen of the campus, even though she was a freshman. It was Du Xiaoyue, who didn't seem to be particularly happy about this kind of attention to herself. No one could understand why she was in this class, because there were only sophomores here. Turns out, she was engaged to a guy from here who her friends thought was pretty boring. In the end, the girl herself said she'd rather be all alone than marry that trash. They all stopped near the desk of the main character, who did not react in any way to the presence of his girlfriends. One of them stepped forward and started walking over to where the guy was sitting. The girl slammed down on her desk with all her might to finally get her attention. She wanted to take the seat with her friends, but Linmu replied that there were plenty of free desks in the back where they could sit down. She didn't care at all, because it was her principle to take a seat right here. The girl immediately noticed that our hero cannot solve even such a simple problem, so even dared to take the first desk, although it is not necessary for him. The guy couldn't answer anything to that because, unfortunately, she was telling the absolute truth. He looked at Du Xiaoyu, who was completely indifferent to what was happening in front of her eyes. At that moment, someone else intervened in their conversation and patted our hero on the shoulder. It was one of his classmates who felt it was necessary to fulfill the request of such a beautiful girl. Eventually, the protagonist realized that he wouldn't be able to withstand that kind of pressure, so he started packing his things to move. Afterward, all the students watched intently as the frustrated loser left his desk. He walked past Du Xiaoyu and slid a glance at her face, which still didn't show any emotion. Still, the girl raised her voice sharply and called the protagonist a coward in disgust. Her friend didn't believe that someone like our hero could get into Dunhai University, and suspected that he must have had some connections. In fact, Du Xiaoyue didn't care where the young man studied as long as she could break her engagement with him. After Linmu finished his classes, he walked lonely in the evening streets of the city, heading towards his home. Despite his indifference to his future bride, it was hard for the young man to tolerate such an attitude. He couldn't get the way the girl had coldly called him a coward out of his mind. The guy himself was also not happy about the engagement because it was all organized by his parents. The main character decided not to fill his head with all these problems. She wanted to go home to see how his grandfather was doing. Getting into the cab that arrived, he hoped the old man was getting better by now. It wasn't long before he arrived at the Lin family's mansion, which looked quite grandiose. Lin Mu walked closer to the door and informed his grandfather that he was already home. The young man was about to go inside, but stopped abruptly because he heard some strange sounds. He immediately recognized the shouts and guessed that his family was arguing again. The protagonist grudgingly noted that all of his relatives were already at the gathering. The air immediately stiffened, everyone froze, and there was an oppressive silence full of unspoken grievances. The first person to greet the young man was Lin Ron's aunt, who explained that Grandpa had gone to the hospital for a checkup and would be back soon. Lin Mu was not surprised by such news, so he calmly replied that he would go to his room. He walked silently past the men who continued to sit silently on the couch. The first to raise his voice was Lin Yitai's elder uncle, who was dissatisfied that his nephew had already completely forgotten about manners and was not greeting them. The second uncle, named Lin Yaif, didn't even think that they should take care of this guy. He whispered quietly with a smirk on his face that the protagonist didn't have long to live anyway. At lunchtime the next day, Lin Mu met with his grandfather and informed him that he would be out of class for a few days, so he would be able to take care of the old man. Grandpa, of course, rejoiced at the news that the young man would be able to spend more time with him. The guy was very sad about the old man's situation because he had been in such bad shape since our hero's mom and dad were gone, so no one knew if he was going to get better. Auntie interrupted the conversation and said that Lin Mu and Grandpa already had to go to dinner. In just a couple of minutes, the entire Lin family was already gathered around the same table. The first to speak was Uncle Lin Yitai, who decided to discuss all the important matters at once. He said they are organizing an auction soon, so he has yet to be authorized to make a decision on the organization. But there have been some problems with the process recently. The man felt that now was a good time to put the auction department under his direction. The other brother felt that if Lin Yitai had a problem with the organization, he shouldn't be involved in such matters, and offered his help. At this point, the main character abruptly got up from his seat and stated that he was full, so he was going to go to his room. No one even noticed that the young man had left the table because a fierce argument over the auction house had broken out. Lin Mu walked into his room and sighed heavily because he was already tired of hearing all the shouting. Our hero went out on the balcony and thought about the fact that, after all, his mom and dad had passed away too soon. He wished his parents could see with their own eyes how the family was slowly disintegrating. All these events did not give rest to the main character, who was now very difficult. Meanwhile, one of the uncles decided to check on the guy after all, suspecting he was having a hard time right now. The man guessed that our hero missed his parents again. Linmu wasn't particularly happy about the stranger's presence, so he wondered if Uncle needed him for something. The uncle didn't want anything from the protagonist, because he just thought the guy didn't eat enough at dinner, which made him a little worried. The man started talking about how only Linmu's father was able to inherit their father's skills. Unfortunately, their brother became completely immersed in the study of antiques, ignoring their grandfather's request to take over the family business. But even when he did take the helm, it didn't help the family. Eventually, my uncle decided not to continue this conversation and said that people shouldn't get what they can't handle. Otherwise, it would be a total mess. Linmu abruptly turned around, his brows furrowed, because he couldn't understand what he was saying those words to. Uncle didn't bother to explain anything and shoved the protagonist sharply in the back. Apparently, the main character couldn't keep his balance, so he fell over the side of the balcony. The wind whistled in his ears, and the boy watched in horror as the hard ground came faster and faster toward him. His body met the ground with a deafening crunch, a scarlet puddle instantly spreading across the asphalt. Meanwhile, the uncle was coldly watching what had happened to his nephew. He called it a small gift and help for his son to be reunited with his parents. Just a moment later, the rest of the family saw that Linmu had just fallen off the balcony. Now the events shift to the doctor's office, who was completely unaware of what was about to happen. The next second, an excited nurse who was just looking for Dr. Joe rushed in. The girl reported that they had a patient who had fallen from the balcony, causing the head doctor to look for Ms. Joe. The doctor realized that the situation was serious, so she informed him that she would now approach the injured person. Meanwhile, the protagonist was already in the emergency room. A good number of doctors gathered around Linmu, desperately trying to save his life. It was obvious from the guy's body that he was very seriously injured, causing his life to literally hang in the balance. Dr. Joe immediately inquired about the patient's condition. One of the doctors reported that the guy had fallen from the 4th floor with a lot of internal bleeding, and his colleague was very talented at acupuncture, which may have helped the victim. The girl knew one effective way, but it might be too risky. The chief physician understood the risks, but the patient needed to be saved right now. Ms. Joe obeyed her boss and immediately took up her needles. She gripped her instrument tightly and announced that she would start right away. In just a few seconds, several needles were sticking out of the protagonist's head, which was the last chance for salvation. The nurse immediately reported that the patient's condition had stabilized. Dr. Joe reported that she used needles to stimulate a state of bay, or run. But if this continued for a long time, the young man's brain would simply die, so she left the rest to her colleagues. The doctors were more likely to perform the surgery to seize the moment as soon as possible. Suddenly, they noticed that the patient's heart rate had risen sharply above normal. The head doctor immediately began to suspect that Dr. Joe's technique didn't help after all. He, too, shouted for his assistants to get the defibrillator ready for emergencies. Metal plates pressed against his chest, and there was the sharp sound of a 200-watt discharge. The guy's body immediately shuddered violently from such an electrifying discharge. The doctor monitored the patient's vitals, but none of this was helping. So the doctors decided to increase the charge to 300 watts. The next second, the beeping of the apparatuses sounded, announcing that Linmu had lost his last signs of life, so the operation was a failure. Dr. Zhou was about to take off her mask and ask her colleagues to inform the patient's guardians of his death. The nurse agreed to honor the girl's request, but still couldn't take her eyes off the patient they couldn't save. Doctors covered our hero's breathless body to further transport it to the morgue. After that, they left the operating room to take care of the rest of the issues. All the hospital staff definitely didn't suspect that at this moment, some kind of dark sphere appeared above Linmu's body. The next moment, a glowing spark of light appeared in the room and seemed to be looking specifically for our hero. She flew around the guy's body for a while, then entered his chest sharply. The young man's body was already cooling down, and his soul had risen above him, leaving only a lifeless shell. The unknown force was not going to let the protagonist go so easily, so it abruptly grabbed his soul. The ghostly fist clenched hard and prepared to drive a spark of life back into Linmu's cooling flesh. When the arm completely disappeared, the main character's body slowly flew up and now began to literally float above the operating table. Little by little, all this unknown power began to merge with Linmu to definitely save his life. After that, a massive mysterious ring appeared on the guy's index finger. Eventually, the fusion process ended, so for a few seconds, the young man froze in midair. The protagonist was still unaware of the mysterious and amazing events that happened to him that night. The next morning, Dr. Joe returned to her workplace and stood under the door of one of the offices. The girl's eyelids drooped heavily, her tired look betraying a sleepless night full of anxious thoughts about her patient's death. A scream pierced the air, and the doctor flinched and her eyes cleared momentarily. She immediately scrambled from her seat and ran in the direction of the screams to see what was going on. It wasn't long before Ms. Zhou was already running into one of the wards where she met the frightened nurses and wondered what had happened here. It was very difficult for the girls to explain anything, so they simply replied that they had seen something very creepy. The doctor immediately looked around to see what could have happened overnight. She walked closer to the body of the main character who was still lying unconscious. It turns out that the entire hospital staff was shocked that the patient had somehow grown overnight. At that time, Dr. Zhou decided to do a detailed examination of the body because it all looked too strange. Only now did she feel that the patient's body was still warm, which raised even more questions. The girl decided to check our hero's breathing with her finger to be sure of her guesses. In the end, Linmu finally woke up from his rather long sleep that might never end. Dr. Zhou didn't know how to react to such a situation, so Hao was too shocked. Meanwhile, the nurses, who were now scared to death, thought the living dead had already come for them. The doctor asked her colleagues to be quiet, because they shouldn't be surprised by such things, because the patient may have experienced clinical death. The protagonist was already seated on the operating table and wondered who all these people around were. The young man looked around, his gaze sliding over unfamiliar walls, as his mind desperately clung to scraps of memories. He was desperate with his head to find any information about the events that had happened. In the end, the dazed Linmu realized that he didn't even remember who he was. After the guy regained consciousness, he was transferred to ICU room number 303. Dr. Zhou was so shocked at the whole situation that she now did not move away from this amazing patient. The girl began to suspect that all this might have happened because the needles had damaged that point responsible for memory. She speculated that the damage done might have been so severe that they had literally forgotten their own name. The doctor asked our hero not to worry, because she was sure that sooner or later his memories would return. The girl informed him that Lin Mu could press a button and a nurse would come to him if he needed anything. Eventually, she left the protagonist alone because there were some other things she needed to take care of. Now the boy was left in complete silence and he could rest after such a hard night. He finally woke up and thought about the fact that he couldn't feel any spiritual chi in this place, and his body itself was weaker than ever. It turns out that there was already someone else in the body who had used the last bit of chi to escape and create a new body for himself. Otherwise, he would have just died. He never even thought that the greatest cultivator in the world would end things like this. The guy was very angry at the Xuantian and Yugui sects, who were too bold. So he was going to return to the cultivation world to cultivate every last one of them. Meanwhile, the Lin family mansion had already heard the latest news from the hospital as well. One of the uncles behind the incident was incredibly angry that his nephew was still not dead. His subordinate reported that the guy was alive, but didn't remember anything, which reassured the man a bit. So he asked him to take care of everything, promising to pay well. Auntie couldn't understand what was going on either, because earlier it was said that Lin Mu couldn't live after all. Apparently, the brother did not know the answers to these questions, because he only had the information that the young man had survived, but lost his memory. The woman, upon hearing this news, immediately began to hope that their nephew was now a common vegetable. Her uncle laughed a little at the fact that for her, memory loss and complete paralysis were one and the same. Auntie wondered what would become of them now and assumed they needed to change plans. The man understood that the sister was the closest person to Lin Mu, so he asked her to go and check on the guy because they shouldn't reveal themselves without finding out the whole situation. He emphasized that the woman would just check on him and see if their nephew's memory loss was true. Meanwhile, Lin Mu sat quietly in his chamber and did not suspect that any plans were being made against him. The silence was interrupted by a knock on the door, and the guy immediately allowed his guests inside. The protagonist couldn't understand what was going on, so he asked Dr. Zhou what was the reason for her visit. The girl explained that someone had come to check on the guy and asked if he remembered the person. Lin Mu, pointing at the bandage on his head, emphasized again that in his condition he couldn't remember anyone. The aunt pretended to be hurt by these words, but the young man simply apologized and informed her that he didn't remember her at all. She asked her nephew not to bother and advised him to get more rest to get better quickly, promising that she would stop by some other time. She also asked the doctor how come the guy looked different for some reason. The girl explained that our hero's face was damaged because of the fall, so they had to do a little surgery. The aunt thanked the doctors for their help and asked them to take care of her nephew. In fact, in her mind, she was already rejoicing that Lin Mu had indeed forgotten everything. A few days later, the guy was still sitting in his room trying to find some information about this world. Our hero learned that in this world, the human race had only existed for 5,000 years, but somehow its spiritual chi was too weak. Thanks to the book he had found, he was finally starting to figure out little by little what this place was all about. Also, Dr. Zhou reported that the protagonist is almost cured, so he can already be discharged. Lin Mu then sincerely thanked the doctor for the care and support she had shown him throughout these days. The girl laughed at the fact that the young man acted as if he came from some ancient time. The young man was embarrassed because she now knew his secret that he liked martial arts stories. The doctor asked our hero to finally go to discharge, to spend more time with family and friends and get his memory back. After following the doctor's instructions, Linmu headed towards the exit of the hospital grounds. A cab was already waiting for the young man on the road to take him to the right place. The guy was actually very surprised that there wasn't much spiritual chi in this world, but humanity had evolved a lot without it. It wasn't long before the car pulled up outside the main entrance to the high school. The protagonist felt the pockets of his pants and realized they were completely empty. The cab driver informed him that the guy needed to pay $50, but Linmu had no way to pay. Linmu explained that he had just gotten out of the hospital, causing him to have no money with him. The man was shocked by this statement because he definitely didn't expect such a thing from the students of Donghai University, where the best and richest students studied. Then he suggested that our hero call one of his friends to pay for him. The guy got really embarrassed because he didn't even know if he had any friends. The main character didn't understand what he should do because he didn't know anyone at this university at all. Suddenly, a girl appeared in the car window who seemed to recognize Linmu and noted that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Linmu realized that this was the perfect opportunity to get out of it. So I will explain the whole situation and asked my friend to pay for the cab. The girl didn't mind helping and thought her friend was in the hospital because he was having plastic surgery. The protagonist asked her to pay first so he could get out of the car and explain the whole situation normally. They walked around the university campus together, after which Linmu explained how he had gotten to the hospital. The guy also mentioned that he fell from the balcony of his own house, which seemed particularly odd against the backdrop of everything else. Hearing that he didn't remember anything, the girl immediately realized that he had forgotten not only the events, but also herself. The protagonist was immediately embarrassed and apologized for the fact that he couldn't even remember his longtime girlfriend. She then inquired if the doctors had told her about some way to bring back Linmu's memories. The guy hadn't heard of anything like this, but he also hoped he could get his memory back. The girl noted with sadness in her voice that memory loss might not be a bad option because sometimes even she wanted to forget everything. At this moment, they met up with Du Xiaoyue, who was accompanied by her girlfriends as usual. The girl averted her gaze from the protagonist, who caused her nothing but disgust. For a split second, her gaze still fell on the guy's face, causing her to immediately notice the change in Linmu. Du Xiaoyu immediately thought that our hero had managed to get some plastic surgery. The young man became very embarrassed at not being the first person to notice this, and once again tried to explain the situation. A friend intervened in their conversation and decided to confirm that Linmu had indeed had the surgery, and remarked that he looked quite cute. Du Xiaoyu only laughed off this guy's decision and emphasized that she still wouldn't marry some lowlife even after some surgery. The guy then concluded that it seems the previous owner of the body was engaged to this woman. The protagonist immediately suggested breaking off their engagement because he was not at all against such a thing. Du Xiaoyu and the girlfriend were incredibly shocked that the guy had so abruptly made such a decision. Linmu confidently stated that he would never want to marry someone like this girl. Of course, the main beauty of the university tried not to give the appearance when she heard such words in her direction, and only noted that it was quite brave on the part of the young man. The guy wanted to break off the engagement completely, so the girl would never bother him again. In turn, the main character's girlfriend laughed and supported such a bold decision. Linmu was very dissatisfied with this kind of attitude, so he now hoped that he would never meet Du Xiaoyu again. The girl could not take her eyes off the guy, whom she had previously considered a loser, because she had not expected such a drastic change. Meanwhile, the girlfriend was very happy for our hero, who finally accomplished his little revenge. Now the guy learned that before his memory loss, he was a weak and depressed man who was easily bullied and humiliated by everyone. The girl emphasized that each time it was not just intimidation, but a real shame. The protagonist realized that Du Xiaoyue had wanted to break off the engagement all along on her own, and he just let her go for nothing. The friend thought that this girl was unworthy of more, so she wondered what Linmu would do next. She thought the guy was already regretting his decision, since his fiancée was the queen of the university, but in fact, he didn't care at all. The girl decided to end this conversation and asked our hero to stay away from Du Xiaoyue next time. She also promised to show the guy the way to his class, because it was pretty clear he didn't even remember that. Along the way, someone threw a sharp dart toward our heroes, which stopped right near the girl's eye. It turned out that her friend had a practiced reaction, so she had no trouble catching it with 2 fingers. It was Chen Hao, who had been told many times by the girl not to play darts in class so as not to hurt his classmates. The guy was really scared because he had pissed off Tang Bay, who was also the headman, and promised that it wouldn't happen again. In turn, the girl emphasized that her classmates' skills are not that good, so he can't show off in public. She decided to use the dart she was able to catch and demonstrate how to do it properly. In the end, Tang Bay hit right into the very target with astonishing accuracy, leaving no chance of a miss. The protagonist was also surprised by this accuracy and noted that it was similar to the level of the foundation dimension. After that, the head teacher reintroduced their classmate, Linmu, to all the guys. She recalled that the guy was injured, causing him to lose his memory, so she asked his classmates to help him get his memories back. All the students welcomed the main character with loud applause to support him at least a little bit. The protagonist noticed that this Tang Bei wasn't such a bad person, and she was also quite popular in her class. Linmu's introduction was suddenly interrupted by a knock on the study door. In just a second, the teacher who was just about to teach a lesson to the students walked into the classroom. The woman with a smile on her face asked her students if she had missed anything important. Linmu immediately thought that it was also their classmate who was a little late. Tang Bei immediately laughed because of her friend mistaking instructor Song Liangju for a student. The protagonist was surprised by this turn of events, and meanwhile, the teacher asked the student to go with her, since he had already returned to the university. The head teacher wasn't happy that her classmate wasn't obeying the teacher, so she shouted for him to hurry up and go with Ms. Song. Song Liangrao had already heard about what had happened to the guy, so she inquired if he was all right. Linmu thanked the teacher for her concern and replied that he was already fully healthy. She was pleased to hear such news from the guy, so she also added that if he needed help, he could always go to her office. The young man was grateful for the opportunity, but their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Tan Bei who came to see if they had finished their conversation because she wanted to have lunch with our hero. Ms. Son reported that they were finished so the students could go to lunch, and she also thanked Bei for her help. The girl was happy at the praise from her teacher and felt that she should help because she was Lin Mu's classmate. Meanwhile, the protagonist, without saying a word, got up from his seat and headed for the exit. Song Liangru looked at the disciples after them and thought about the fact that it seemed that not only the guy's appearance but also his personality had changed. On the way to the cafeteria, our hero decided to talk about how his friend threw that dart so well. She must be working out a lot. Tang Bei explained that given her training at home, this simple trick came quite easily to her, and asked if the young man wanted to practice. The guy, excited by such an offer of his out of loss, replied that it would be good for him to practice. The friend decided to examine the protagonist a little more closely and immediately noted that his body was stronger than before. The changes were actually quite significant, as if Lin Mu had practiced long and hard. The girl didn't know that falling from the balcony could do such good, but the young man himself wasn't particularly happy because he actually almost died. In the end, she agreed that it certainly wouldn't be worth the death of the main character. The guy saw that his friend got really upset thinking about it, so he asked her not to take it so seriously. Then Tan Bei had an interest in finding out what our hero was going to do next after all. Linmu calmly replied that he had no plans due to the fact that he couldn't even remember anything from the past. The girl tried to find some silver lining in that, so she asked with a smirk if the guy had ever wanted to live his life any other way. The protagonist instantly froze in confusion, realizing that he had never attempted to answer such a deep and complex question before. Tang Bei revealed that the past Lin Mu was an introverted weakling who couldn't stand up for himself, and people like Du Xiao constantly bullied him. In turn, the current Lin Mu not only looked different, but also had a completely different personality. The girl believed that this accident was given to him by God as a chance to change himself and start his life. She suggested that the young man take the opportunity after all, since he had been blessed with such a super-powered body. The guy asked his friend in surprise what he needed to do to change his life in some way. A slight smile immediately appeared on Tang Bei's face because it seemed like she already had a clear plan lined up. She wondered if he was even once familiar with the rumor of a mysterious organization called the Dragon Protectors. The protagonist was surprised to hear such a strange name for this organization. The girl explained that she had to say something about the martial arts world before she could talk about them. She directly asked if Linmu believed that there were people who could kill with mere leaves. The guy immediately assumed that these warriors were using spiritual chi filling, so he immediately replied that he believed that. The girl at once earnestly warned her friend that these people were not easy to find. She said that the legends said that some masters had reached the Xian Tian dimension, and even her grandfather had once gotten quite close to the place. Unfortunately, the old man was defeated by his inner demons and lost all of his cultivation, though to the joy of the entire family, he still survived. The main character asked Bei not to be sad because Grandpa was still alive, which was the most important thing. The girl listened to Lin Mu and told him that there were a lot of talented people in their Tang sect, so she hoped that someone would reach the Xiantian dimension. The cultivator was surprised to hear of a familiar organization and immediately thought that his girlfriend was a member of Sichuan. Tang Bei immediately laughed and poked the guy in the forehead because it was like what the protagonist thought of the Tang sect from a martial arts novel. She confirmed that their sect of poison and hidden weapon masters existed beyond the novels. At the peak of the organization, they had quite a few Shantian experts, who were quite strong warriors. Linmu clearly didn't expect to hear something like this, so he immediately asked a question about how powerful these people were. The girl knew everything from her grandfather, who said that all the techniques were created by these particular fighters. Our hero had already assumed that these Jian experts were equal in strength to the Foundation measurement level, and asked if there were any such masters in their sect. His friend immediately emphasized that the Dragon Protectors were created by the Huaxia government for special occasions. That's why some sects send their disciples to the team to break through faster, and even Tang Bei herself coaches such a team. The protagonist started to have a bit of hesitation because he wasn't sure if he could join the team if he wasn't in a cult. The girl reassured him that the young man's potential, combined with good training, would allow him to be no weaker than their recruits, and asked if he wanted to join the Dragon Defenders. For a while, Linmu wondered if he should make such a spontaneous decision. In the end, the brave man firmly stated that he wanted to live another life after all. That was the end of their conversation, and the events continued deep into the night. The protagonist had already found himself outside the large building of Tenglong Corporation. In fact, the young man was surprised that the organization's bazaar was right in the middle of the city. Tanbebe didn't see it as a problem because it's the right place to house an important agency for the government. Plus, if there's any urgency, you need to respond as quickly as possible. The guy realized that he had said something somewhat stupid, so he confirmed that his friend was right after all. Quite soon, they were already inside the Tenglong Corporation building and headed towards the elevator to go to the upper floors. Our hero, having seen the enormous scale, ascertained that this was the base of the organization. Meanwhile, the girl pulled out her card to confirm her identity. She swiped the document across the elevator panel, as it could only be used with special identification. After a second, a notification appeared on the screen that the download of the required files had started. Tang Bei began to input the necessary information, while simultaneously explaining that the Tenglong Corporation was just a disguise. She asked the protagonist to just wait a bit to see the true extent of it. The cultivator was not yet familiar with such technology, so he was startled when the elevator began to plummet downward. A second later, the bell rang to let them know that they had already arrived at the right floor. When the elevator doors opened, Tang Bei announced that they had arrived at the Dragon Protector's base. It turned out that under the ground, there was a not insignificant room where a large number of employees of the organization worked. The girl wasted no time and immediately took her friend to the office of one of the leaders of the Dragon Defenders. The man sensed someone else's presence, so he immediately awakened from his sleep. He, surprised at the unexpected visit, immediately asked what Bei was doing here at such a late hour. Meanwhile, our hero had managed to see the glow of spiritual qi from this old man. So it looked like he had broken through the foundation dimension straight into the energy gathering dimension. But at the same time, the guy realized that this warrior was still far away from Shantian's dimension. Then Tang Bei explained to Uncle Yang that she had brought him a rare martial arts genius, a person of extraordinary talent that one would not find among thousands of masters. The man was unhappy that the girl was making such a joke when introducing her boyfriend, and emphasized that it was too late for him to learn martial arts. She immediately explained that it wasn't her boyfriend and suggested that the leader check out the main character's skills on her own. Uncle Yang couldn't refuse Sweet Bei, so he decided to believe her words after all. He stepped toward the young man, placed his hand confidently on his shoulder, and gazed intently into his face. In the end, the man was greatly surprised because in him, the guy had a pretty strong body, even though he didn't have any martial arts skills. Tang Bei rejoiced because her words were confirmed and also added that Linmu used to be an ordinary guy before, but after the fall, his body had become many times stronger. Uncle Yan's eyes widened in amazement because it all sounded literally impossible. The guy himself didn't really understand much of anything either because the hospital had tried everything, but never figured out the reasons for these changes. The leader of the organization understood that our hero already knew about the Dragon Protectors, so he immediately offered him to join the organization. And Linmu did not hesitate and agreed. The man said that the young man has to pass a test before becoming part of the team, and when he does join, it won't be so easy to leave them. The protagonist had already heard all this from his girlfriend before coming here, so he had already made up his mind long ago and wanted to join them. Uncle Yan was happy with this answer, so he immediately said that he would start preparing for the test and was confident that with his talent, Linmu would be able to pass all the prepared tests. He handed the guy a book that described a breath-holding technique and asked the newcomer to burn it as soon as he read it, because leaking the information would not be tolerated. The man emphasized that our hero just needs to follow the instructions in the book, and then, after he has mastered the technique, find Uncle Yan himself. The young man also thanked the leader of the organization for the donated equipment and took the textbook firmly in his hands. Tang Bay, after making sure that all the details were settled, suggested that Linmu's trial should begin, to which Uncle Yang gave his consent. When the boys left the office, the man laughed contentedly because he had gotten such a capable fighter. He made sure that the girl had brought him some kind of miracle, so the Dunhai branch would be getting a new expert very soon. After meeting with the leader of the Dragon Defenders, the protagonist went to the dormitory. Linmu sat and carefully studied the breath-holding technique so that he could join the organization as soon as possible. He was still clueless as to why Lu Shouyang's spiritual qi was such a strange comma, and speculated that it might be because the energy here was weak. At this moment, the mysterious ring reappeared on his index finger. In just a second, it completely materialized and absorbed all the energy. It appeared that this piece of jewelry was the only thing left from the cultivator's world, so he wondered when he would be able to reach the items from the storage in this ring. In the end, the guy decided to go look for information about it in the library world as soon as the sun came up. The protagonist followed his plan, and from the very morning, he was already in the right place. With a heavy stack of books in his hands, he sank down at the nearest vacant table and began flipping through the pages, searching the texts for the information he needed. The silence was suddenly broken by an extraneous sound, causing the young man to flinch and tear himself away from the book. It turns out it was Du Xiaoyue who was unhappy because some other guy was hitting on her. The girl coldly warned Van Don to leave her alone, adding contemptuously that his family money did not make him of any importance in her eyes. The young man still wouldn't back down because he realized that they were one colpigate and perfect for each other. Du Xiaoyue was displeased that he had such a high opinion of himself and emphasized that the Wang family would never pass on to him. After that, the girl, after making it clear that she wasn't interested at all, turned around and walked away from Wang Dong. The guy was so annoying that he kept pestering her and made fun of the fact that she was engaged to some loser from the Lin family as well. Everyone had already heard about Linmu being a complete lowlife, so Wang Dong felt that he couldn't be with such a beauty. It was actually quite difficult for the girl to contain her emotions being around such an unpleasant person. Meanwhile, the main character wasn't paying attention at all to what was going on between these two. Wang Dong saw that his competitor was here, so he decided to pester Linmu himself. The guy still continued to pretend he couldn't see or hear anything and wasn't about to take a break from his book. The bully was very pleased that our hero lacked any manners. He took a decisive step toward the young man and, looking intently into his eyes, asked him if he had a problem, since he so persistently avoided even a simple glance in his direction. Our hero didn't even know if he knew this person, so he just asked what Wang Dong wanted. Then the guy started threatening Lin Mu to hurry up and break the engagement with Du Xiaoyue. In turn, the young man himself said that they had already canceled everything, so the girl's affairs no longer interested him. The bully turned around in surprise and asked Du Xiaoyu herself if it was true. The beauty herself decided to take advantage of the situation and quietly, idly lied that it wasn't like that at all. The guy couldn't stand the fact that the protagonist seemed to have lied to him, so he snatched the book from his hands with anger. From surprise, the young man let the textbook out of his hands, and it crashed to the floor with a clatter. Wang Dong was very angry that the young man dared to cheat him, and promised that he would definitely pay for it. Linmu was not at all afraid of such a development, so he just indifferently hummed in response. The protagonist did not tolerate such an attitude to himself, so he sharply grabbed the guy, who still could not get behind him. He asked with a serious look what Wang Dong was going to do in such a case. The brave man did not trifle and decided to teach the bully a lesson, who could not answer him. The bully, who was in fact a pathetic weakling, flopped clumsily to the floor. Wang Dong forcefully tried to stand up after the protagonist had taught him such a cruel lesson. Lin Mu, not satisfied with the humiliation he had already inflicted, kicked him with cold cruelty and then roughly stepped on his chest. The protagonist, after disarming his opponent, turned around to talk to Du Xiaoyue. Ono directly asked if the girl still really needed this engagement. The girl emphasized again that it was absolutely not her wish, but it was too difficult to go against the will of the old men of their families. In fact, Linmu hadn't even thought about the fact that Du Xiaoyue would annoy him so much before. The guy then turned to Van Don, who seemed to hear everything perfectly, and explained that, technically, they were engaged, so the guy had better stay away. Meanwhile, the bully raised his voice and asked if the main character knew who he was. The guy didn't care about this at all, so he pressed down on Wang Dong with even more force. Daredevil immediately howled in pain and now begged our hero to let him go, promising to just walk away. In the end, Lin Mu still let the kid go and immediately ordered him to disappear from his sight. The self-confident guy certainly did not tolerate such humiliation before, so silently left the library. without responding to our hero in any way. That resentment had sunk too deep, so he was already making plans on how to get back at the brave man who had acted so inappropriately. Meanwhile, there was a loud clamor around because no one expected to see such a fight in the university library. One of the students was very unhappy that someone allowed himself to make noise and fight in such a place. The main character immediately apologized and tried to lie that some student had just bumped into the table. He tried to remedy the situation and began to put the furniture back in its place. In turn, Du Xiaoyu noted that the young man had indeed changed because he would never have done such a thing before. Linmu himself thought that this might be for the best because he would have a lot less problems now. The girl, despite her dislike for her fiancé, warned him that Wang Dong was the kind of person who was eternally vengeful. The protagonist only smiled slightly upon hearing this information and thanked her for the warning. He turned next and his gaze fell on the very book the bully had snatched from his hands. A line immediately caught my eye that spoke of someone having to finish what they started in case the enemies returned. The guy thought about the fact that he had already learned the technique, so now it would be worth it to find Liu Shouyang and get something new. It is evening and the events are transferred to the Wang family home, where another scandal is already brewing. His father was unhappy that none of his subordinates were able to bring him useful information, even though he was paying well and had already been waiting for a whole week. All the staff members were saying that Linmu was only a weakling and a coward, but the problem was that he was somehow able to break the young master's arm. They universally reported seeing the guy like this before, when he was a completely different person. The head of the family was interested when he heard about the sudden change in their purpose. One of the subordinates said that they bribed someone from the servants at the Lin family's house, who said that after the incident, the young man lost his memory and became like this, and even stopped showing up at home. Mr. Wang was going to act decisively, so he ordered his fighters to bring this guy in no matter what. All the guards lined up in a row and unanimously accepted the order. The old man wasn't going to be afraid of some loser Lin Mu just because of his family, because he had personally wronged him. The next morning, the protagonist, not suspecting that the hunt for him had already begun, came to the university as usual. Lin Mu still began to feel the tense atmosphere around him, which suggested that something was wrong after all. Suddenly, his path was blocked by some small van that looked rather suspicious. The next moment, a group of hooligans came out of there, specifically looking for our hero. Their ringleader announced with a smirk on his face that their boss would like to invite Lin Mu over for a cup of tea. The young man didn't expect this turn of events at all, because he certainly wasn't familiar with their boss. The bandits didn't like that he kept wasting their time, so they ordered him to go with them if the guy didn't want to get beaten up. In the end, our hero agreed to the stranger's terms, because he didn't want to get into a conflict again. Now he was convinced that the Wang family really did enjoy revenge quite a bit. In fact, Lin Mu wasn't afraid at all and thought that it was even for the best because he didn't mind participating in something like this. It wasn't long before Mr. Wang was informed that the man he needed had arrived on the scene. The man, exhaling smoke from his cigar, ordered his subordinates to bring the young man to him. The guards silently turned on the spot and headed out to do their boss's bidding. A few minutes passed, and there was a knock on the door, whereupon the gentleman asked the guest to enter. It was obviously Lin Mu, accompanied by quite a number of guards. The man immediately inquired if the guy knew what he had interfered in, but the man pretended he had absolutely no idea. The head of the family then decided to give a little clue and said that Wang Dong was his son. The guy boldly suggested that the battered toddler had complained to his old man, who was now seeking revenge. The man only laughed at the boldness of our hero, because before him, no one had ever dared to speak to a distinguished gentleman in such a way. He stated that he would be more respectful to Lin Mu because of his family, so he would let the young man go as soon as he tore his tendons. The protagonist continued to stand his ground and wondered what would happen if he didn't. One of the guards put his hand on the guy's shoulder and advised him not to complicate an already difficult situation. Lin Mu didn't appreciate being treated this way, so he elbowed this Wang family subordinate. He grabbed the guard's arm about to straighten him out and emphasized that they were actually here talking, so no one should get in the way. The protagonist was so strong that he could easily throw over even the most experienced fighter. Eventually, the subordinate fell with such force that he broke the table beneath him. Mr. Wang immediately noted that the young man possessed some pretty good techniques. At the same time, he was sure that Lin Mu still wouldn't be able to cope when he was attacked by several fighters at once. The guy himself hadn't lost his fighting spirit, so the smile still held on his face. The man was incredibly angry over such insolence of the young man, so he ordered his men to tear him to pieces. Our hero asked all of his opponents to attack at once, because they didn't have much time for all this fighting. He got into a fighting stance because he wanted to deal with all the guards as quickly as possible and move on to their boss. Everyone started attacking Lin Mu, but he masterfully dealt with each opponent with a single precise strike. In 10 seconds, the protagonist had dealt with each guard and was now carefully adjusting his suit. Mr. Wang was shocked by this turn of events because he was confident in the strength of his subordinates. The young man offered to talk to him in person because he and his son had taken up too much of his time, which needed to be reimbursed somehow. The man was scared out of his wits, so he now said it was only their fault and offered $20 million in compensation. Linmu didn't really want to receive any money that was definitely obtained through unfair means. The frightened old man was desperate to prove that it had all been earned in a completely clean way. The protagonist decided to believe Mr. Wang and reached into his jacket pocket. He handed the man his credit card and asked him to transfer the amount he needed there. The old man didn't mind keeping his promise, but he needed a computer to do it. Linmu let him walk over to the work table, so Mr. Wang quickly entered the necessary information and reported that everything was ready. The man demonstrated that the money had already gone to our hero's card and offered him to check it personally. The boy thanked him for his cooperation, and meanwhile, the old man himself was surreptitiously reaching into one of the nightstands of his desk. Mr. Wang did not take his eyes off Linmu and asked him to take his time like this. He already had the gun in his hands and offered the young man some more time to chat. Seeing the muzzle of the gun, the protagonist immediately became silent, and the old man wondered why he had stopped so abruptly. The man noted that the guy used to be so cool about himself, but at one point, all his courage was gone somewhere. Linmu was still just as unafraid of his main opponent, so a smug smirk reappeared on his face. He abruptly knocked over the table where Mr. Wang was sitting to throw him off balance. The head of the family was not prepared for such a development, so he was unable to keep the gun in his hands. Our hero asked if it was worth it and reported that the man had just dug his own grave. Now the old man tried to justify himself and said that it was just a slight misunderstanding, and he himself really wanted to talk to Linmu. The young man was certain that trust was out of the question between them, so he wasn't even going to engage in a conversation with Mr. Wang. If he wanted to kill Mr. Wang, he would do it right now, so the guy advised him not to make him nervous. The man asked not to complicate the situation between their families and promised to fulfill any order of the young master, using all his abilities. The protagonist was quite interested when he heard such words and rejoiced at such an opportunity for revenge. In a fit of rage, he swiftly intercepted Mr. Wang's neck, intending to teach him a harsh lesson. The young man shoved some white pill into the old man's mouth, who didn't even resist. Mr. Wang swallowed this mysterious object without the slightest hesitation. He immediately grabbed his throat and started yelling at our hero, who gave him the unknown pill. It turns out that the young man gave him a poison from martial arts novels called Han Xiaobang Budian and promised to give him an antidote every 3 months if the man behaved well. Linmu warned that the man might die a painful death and advised him to think carefully about his decisions. At this moment, the protagonist's phone rang, who was about to leave Mr. Wang's office. It turned out to be Tang Bay, who had already managed to lose her buddy. She asked the young man to come to the base as soon as possible because there was already an assignment for him. It wasn't long before Linmu reached the Tanglong Corporation building, where his girlfriend was waiting for him. Most of the staff had already gathered in the hall and were whispering amongst themselves because something important seemed to have happened. The protagonist, upon meeting his acquaintance, immediately worriedly inquired about what had happened. The girl reported that their organization had recently caught the leader of a mercenary group. Because of this, his subordinates took 20 people hostage, demanding the release of their leader, but he eventually lost control of the situation. It turns out that not only have the mercenaries taken hostages, but they want to attack the Pearl Tower, so they need to be stopped immediately. Linmu asked if they had a plan, and the girl told him that their main objective was to rescue the hostages and help the other units. The young man immediately thought that just the two of them would only go to rescue the victims of these villains. Bebe explained that if they had enough people, the organization wouldn't call for recruits. She explained that our hero only needed to locate the hostages and then notify his elders of the location. Meanwhile, the leader of the Dragon Protectors finally turned to his subordinates to inform their next steps. With the utmost seriousness in his voice, he emphasized that this assignment was very important, so they should waste no time. Finally, he firmly ordered all the fighters to immediately move out to their missions. After that, our hero, following the order, immediately went to the West District of Donghai City. He had to jump across rooftops, so no one could reveal his location. The guy started to suspect something because he felt that there were a lot of people in this place, but all the rooms were empty for some reason. Eventually, he did decide to jump off the building to get a better look at the area. Linmu hid near one of the windows to get a better look at what was going on inside. He could see that there were lights on inside the building, but he still couldn't make out any people. Only now did the protagonist realize what the whole problem was. The boy walked over to the hatch that was quite nearby to get a better look at this entrance. He sensed that this was where the enemies had been hiding all this time, underground. With some effort, Linmu lifted the heavy hatch to enter the base. Brave immediately saw the glow and found confirmation of his hunches. Beneath these trapdoors was a large staircase that led somewhere underground. All this time, a guard was standing near the entrance, looking around carefully to make sure no stranger was missed. Suddenly, the fighter heard someone's footsteps behind them, though they weren't expecting any visitors. As a result, all he saw was a pair of legs that was rapidly flying straight at his head. Linmu managed to masterfully produce a grab of his first opponent using his legs. The guard tried to call for someone to help him, but the guy squeezed his neck so hard it was pretty hard to do. The opponent helplessly wheezed, unable to even move as Linmu's iron grip tightened on his throat. The enemy helplessly collapsed to the ground like a hamstring, and Linmu gracefully stepped off him, landing softly beside him. The protagonist began to quickly remove the uniforms from his defeated opponent, unbuckling multiple straps and latches with honed dexterity. He quickly changed his clothes, and now he was no different from the guards here, because his uniform fit him like a uniform and his mask concealed his face. Linmu didn't waste any time and went to the boss room to report that they had something going on at the base and lure out the main target. A pumped-up giant immediately appeared from behind the door and inquired as to what had happened. Our hero watched the actions of the boss closely and tried to think of something to answer one of the bandits. Meanwhile, the leader was already reaching for his gun because he was beginning to suspect that there was something wrong with this guard. Linmu reacted to his movements and immediately grabbed his hand to snatch his weapon. The boss was not an easy man to deal with, so he quickly regrouped and tried to hit him with his knee. In turn, the young man himself also managed to see his opponent's attack and countered in time. The bandit's leg fractured with a crack, because Linmu's body was much stronger than one would have guessed at first glance. The fighter let out a heartbreaking scream, after which his body twisted in unbearable pain. He fell to the ground with a thud and clutched at his broken leg, still holding the gun tightly in his other hand. The gang leader immediately pointed a gun at the protagonist and fearfully asked who he was. This guy immediately pointed a weapon at Linmu and demanded to give his name, but he was not intimidated and continued to remain silent. The young man realized that he couldn't deal with this thug that easily, so he hit him once more with his knee. Apparently, there was no way the bandit could block this attack due to his serious wounds and severe pain. His consciousness went out like a burned-out light bulb, and his body collapsed to the ground, finally out of the fight. The protagonist looked around and realized that all the hostages were just in this room. In the corner of the room, his gaze caught on two shabby bags without any identifying marks. The boy quickly approached the suspicious items and didn't hesitate to unzip the zipper to see what lurked inside. Turns out there was a mountain of money hiding inside them all along. Linmu was shocked that these people had stolen so much money, which was also all in cash. A new idea immediately popped into the guy's head because he realized that the hostages didn't know who he was yet. He zipped up the zippers, gripped the handles of his bags tightly, and raced away, realizing that now he could easily get rich. One of the girls didn't seem particularly pleased that the protagonist had done such a thing. She suspected that Linmu had killed the other guy just to take all the money for himself. Beauty was also quite bright, so she noticed one interesting thing right away. The girl noticed that our hero left a gun on the floor, which could have been her chansom. She skillfully performed a few somersaults and quickly grabbed the weapon in her hands. Undaunted, the brave hostage pointed her weapon at Linmu and ordered him not to move. Our hero only sighed heavily because now he realized that he would not be able to leave this place so easily. He immediately explained that he was not here to bully the hostages and allowed them to walk from here. The girl understood his motives, but as a police officer, she can't let the villain escape. So she ordered the guy to drop the bags and put his hands behind his head. Then Linmu was not confused and offered to split the loot in half, pretending that they had not seen each other in this place. The hostage still wasn't going to give up that easily, so once again she repeated her order to put the bags down or she would shoot. The protagonist realized that the jokes with this officer were short, so he threw all the money on the floor. Meanwhile, the girl turned to one of the hostages and asked him to take off his belt to tie the hands of the villain. At the same time, the young man sat down on the floor and already pretended to be resigned to his fate. Obviously, our hero had already come up with a new plan, so he was just waiting for the right moment to attack. It only took one precise movement for him to stop the man who was about to tie him up. In just a second, Linmu had already turned around in such a way that he was able to use the hostage as a live account. Eventually, the guy managed to knock him over in a way that knocked the officer off his feet. Without wasting a second, the experienced fighter ran up to the girl to snatch the gun from her hands. He emphasized that the hostage did not need to do that and asked her to go back to the corner and sit still. The officer realized that she had no other choice, so she complied with Linmu's order, who only grudgingly hummed. The protagonist realized that he had solved all the problems, so he headed for the exit again with 2 bags of money in his hands. Before finally leaving the enemy base, he decided to strip off all his uniforms. At the same time, The guard's body was still lying breathlessly at the entrance of this huge basement. A satisfied smile immediately appeared on the guy's face because he was able to successfully complete his first mission. He decided to search the territory of the base and find a suitable place to hide the found baggage. Linmu didn't hesitate to throw the bags into the well, which turned out to be a pretty good storage area. The protagonist was going to raise money after this whole operation was over. Afterward, he called Bay to report that he had found something suspicious here. It wasn't long before the dragon protectors arrived on the scene and gradually removed the hostages from the bandit base. Among the victims was the policewoman who wanted to arrest Linmu for theft and didn't realize that he was standing quite nearby. The guy himself informed his partner that he would go report to headquarters to say that the hostages had been found and they could proceed with the next part of the plan. The girl herself was glad that all the people were safe now. They then put all the hostages on the bus, so the whole operation to rescue them went smoothly. For a while, Tang Bay stared after the transport with the rescued people and pondered the recent events. But she said the mission wasn't over because the hostages said there was something suspicious inside. The protagonist began to suspect something, so he asked what the people were talking about. Turns out they had already managed to tell the two mercenaries had gotten into a fight, but by the time the dragon protectors got here, two were already out. The main problem was that they couldn't find the very same bandit money anywhere. It was obvious that whoever knocked out those mercenaries was an expert, because it looked as if his opponents didn't stand a chance. The girl was about to report to her superiors that there was a master of such a level among the bandits. Linmu, who knew the whole truth, only smiled and agreed that a real expert had been here. After all the searches, our heroes went to the base of their organization to report the results of the mission. The guy reported that he had some business to take care of and said goodbye to Tang Bay. He quickly left the Dragon Defender's base and hailed himself a cab. The protagonist quickly jumped into the back seat of the car and asked the driver to take him to Pingjiang District. After arriving at the location, he handed the driver some money and asked him to wait here, while he quickly picked up some clothes. The man listened to Linmu, so the man was able to go about his business in peace. The driver decided to smoke a cigarette to pass the time while waiting for his customer. After a couple minutes, the guy came back and asked him to open the trunk so he could throw his stuff in. The cab driver still didn't suspect anything, so he quickly pressed the button and complied with his passenger's request. The protagonist wasted no time and quickly put 2 heavy bags of money inside. The driver with a cigarette in his teeth noted that the guy was very pleased after picking up his so-called clothes. Linmu just laughed in response, but he thought to himself that there could be no other reaction to 10 million euros. Meanwhile, Mr. Wang has already received the report of his body checkup after being poisoned by an unknown pill. The subordinate handed him an envelope and informed him that it said the man had not been poisoned. The doctor said he was perfectly healthy and there should be no problems with his body. But there was still one small flaw. Mr. Wang wasn't going to listen to his subordinate any further and asked to be left alone. He couldn't contain his anger because he was beginning to suspect that Linmu had simply tricked him. At that moment, his train of thought was interrupted by a sudden ringing on his phone. The man's gaze immediately darted to the screen of his smartphone, where an incoming call from an unknown subscriber was displayed. Mr. Wang abruptly brought the phone to his ear and coldly demanded an explanation as to who dared to interrupt him at such an inopportune moment. The voice in the receiver belonged to the very man he had been pondering only a moment ago. It turns out that the protagonist had already made a reservation at Wang Zhang's restaurant and hoped that he could have a little chat with his new acquaintance here. The man was immediately interested in such an offer, so he was going to get there in a couple minutes. Wang Dong actually tensed up because he couldn't even figure out what this guy wanted right now. Our hero immediately noted that the old man arrived here rather quickly, and the latter explained that he didn't want to keep Linmu waiting. The man was quite excited because he couldn't guess what Brother Lin wanted and promised to fulfill his every wish. The guy laughed quietly and looked away and replied that nothing of the sort had happened. He began his story by saying that Wang Dong should already be aware of the situation with the Lin family. The protagonist poured a glass of wine and hinted that there was something only a man himself could do for him. The old man, suddenly revitalized, asked the young man to elaborate on his situation. Linmu explained that he had some cash, but he couldn't really use the money. The young man understood that Mr. Wang was a businessman, and thus could be a useful ally in his plans if he presented his proposal correctly. The old man instantly realized what the protagonist was getting at, and noted that he didn't have many useful skills, but business was his forte. He immediately asked exactly how much money Linmu kept with him. The protagonist confidently said that he had 20 million euros, and he expected it. But somehow Van Don had to turn that amount into an even larger sum. It was no problem for the man, so he asked the guy to rest a little and trust him. Linmu raised his glass and noted that in that case, he would have to visit his comrade beforehand. Wang Dong also grabbed his glass and happily replied that there would be no problem with that. After meeting the old man, our hero immediately went to the hostel, which became his permanent place of lodging. He sat down at his laptop while his roommates were getting ready to go to the university. The young man realized that there were too many extra eyes here, making it difficult for him to cultivate. So it was better to look out for some place with rent. Browsing through apartment websites, Linmu saw a good option for himself. Eventually, the guy firmly decided it was time to check one important detail. It wasn't long before he arrived at the right place and immediately saw that everything around him looked pretty good. The protagonist stopped in front of the door and thought that it would be nice if the owner of this house turned out to be a nice person. Forgetting any excitement, the guy pressed the right button and a loud ringing sounded. Somewhere from the back of the house came the voice of the landlord, asking him to wait a little while. After a few seconds, a very young boy appeared out of the door and inquired about who Linmu was looking for. Our hero was a little surprised, but explained that he had seen on the internet that this house was for rent. Now the young man understood the reason for this unexpected guest's visit. Linmu, in turn, nodded to confirm his intentions and immediately inquired about the monthly fee. The owner decided not to discuss all the details on the street and offered the guy to go inside and look around and then talk about the price. The protagonist did not object, so he silently put on his guest slippers and followed the master of the house. Only now did the young man realize that they hadn't introduced themselves to each other, so he said that his name was Meng Xuan. The guy calmly and uncluttered replied that his name was Lin Mu. Meng Xuan had immediately warned him that there were 2 other people upstairs living here, so there was only one room left vacant. He showed him a place that was rented out and told him that its cost was $1,200 a month, but that he would have to pay for the whole year at once. Our hero was in no hurry to agree to such conditions because he thought that the price for one small room was too high. The owner didn't really stick with his client and immediately hinted that there were rooms nearby that only cost a few $100s a month. Someone's voice was heard outside the door, immediately noting that another jelly man had come, although Meng Xuan didn't really need money. In the end, it turned out to be a teacher from the university who recognized her student immediately. It seems the main character didn't expect to see a familiar face here either. Meng Xuan was also surprised because he began to guess that the 2 knew each other. Song Liangju confirmed his guess with a smile on her face and explained that this guy was her student. For his part, Lin Mu began to hesitate because he realized that it would be difficult to do anything next to Miss Song. He decided to say the price was too high for him after all, and he was going to look for other places. Also, the guy didn't apologize for wasting his time. And meanwhile, Song Liangju was surprised that he, with his family's wealth, couldn't afford rent. The woman began to suspect that something had happened to her student's family. In the end, the protagonist still managed to find a new home for himself. Although Western style was not his preference, he didn't waste time thinking about it and simply made a decision, choosing this option as the most practical in this situation. It was quite a nice and quiet place here, which was perfect for cultivation. Linmu took a closer look around and noticed that the kitchen was also not bad. The young man thought about the fact that he hadn't cooked for himself in a while, so this was a good opportunity. Within a couple of minutes, he had already started cooking a rather appetizing dinner for himself, the aromas of which filled the entire room. Our hero thought that his skills are good, but the ingredients are so bad, so it's better to order new products online. He quickly pulled out his phone and decided to look up some herbs that might help with the cooking. Immediately, he noticed some merchandise that interested him more than the condiments. Linmu definitely didn't expect to encounter a spiritual ginseng amongst the vastness of the internet. The guy was sure that this root was perfect for him, so he didn't hesitate long to buy it. He noticed that the seller was located in Nangu, but distance didn't matter when it came to such a rare and high-quality item that was worth any effort. In the end, the protagonist had to use an airline to get to the seller. The boy thought about his first time on an airplane and wondered what the experience was like on board. On the way, he suddenly remembered the ticket and, pausing for a moment, reached into his pocket to see exactly where his seat was. The protagonist already had an electronic version of the ticket, so he was able to see all the information on his phone. He was glad to have the whole company behind him because the bank had the airplane and everything else ready for him. Luo Biyun, who belonged to Hao Yue Corp., was already seated on board. Eventually, the other passengers began to take their seats as well, creating a measured buzz around them. The girl was surprised to notice that another passenger had entered the airplane that she certainly hadn't expected to see. She was sure the entire airplane was entirely at their company's disposal, but that turned out not to be the case. One employee said that before boarding, the airline told him they needed one more seat for a VIP. Luo Biyun still didn't understand what was going on, but she didn't object to this decision of the airline. In fact, she had no idea how important the main character was. For his part, Linmu decided to act as friendly as possible, so he greeted the other passengers with a smile on his face. He then sat down in the reserved seat and began to look at the functions of the built-in touchscreen. The girl was silent, but all the while she was scrutinizing the look and behavior of her unexpected guest. Her coworker offered to talk to the airline if this one didn't suit the supervisor, but she was totally cool with it, so she replied that it was fine. Luo Biyun mockingly pointed out that compared to the rest of the VIPs, there was still something interesting about our hero. Quite quickly, the plane flew to its destination and landed successfully at the airport. The first to come down from the board was Linmu, who wanted to take care of his business as soon as possible. The girl was surprised and a little offended that he left and didn't even speak to her. The employee wanted to give Ms. Lowe some advice, but ended up not having time to finish his sentence. The boss quickly replied that there was no need for that, because this kind of situation was not new to her. Meanwhile, the auction, which featured that most unusual plant, was already in full swing. The presenter talked about the fact that it was identified by a botanist and evaluated by professionals, so a lot of beneficial qualities were officially confirmed. That is why the starting price of this item was $15,000. The main character felt funny when he heard this amount, so now he thought that all these people didn't realize the full value of ginseng. The bidders immediately began to actively outbid each other and reached the mark of 22,000. Linmu didn't change his mind and immediately called out a bet of 44,000 to quickly win this battle. The presenter got excited when he heard such an amount and asked if there would be any other suggestions. He then began counting down to 3, and when finished, he struck his gavel, announcing the sale of this lot. He was happy to report that the plant had been sold to the young gentleman who was the protagonist. Linmu was satisfied with his success, so he quickly picked up his goods and left the hall. Also, the young man hoped that the bronze cauldron should be in place by the time he returned from the auction. Meanwhile, Lo Bi-yun went to a dinner party where quite a few elites had gathered. Next to her was Miss Lee's assistant, whom she asked to come over. The girl handed her subordinate a glass of wine and asked her to hold it for a while. The employee was surprised because the banquet wasn't over yet, and Lo Bi-yun was already going somewhere. Then she explained that all she wanted to do was to go outside and get some fresh air and leave the rest to Ms. Lee. Eventually, the girl settled into her car and rejoiced that she was finally free. At the same time, he realized that this freedom was only an illusion and could not be 100%. The bodyguards were still following Luo Bi-yun, but she realized that it was all just for her own safety, although having 5 special forces was overkill. Suddenly, some plan had formed in the girl's mind, so a sly grin immediately appeared on her face. She decided to throw the guards off her tail while she had the chance, so she hit the gas pedal with all her might. The bodyguards immediately realized what their ward was up to and rushed after her as quickly as possible. The cars immediately moved from their seats and with all speed and flew after the unruly Luo Bi-yun. In turn, the girl herself realized that her cunning plan hadn't worked after all. After driving a little further, she had to stop at a red traffic light. In the end, Luo Bi-yun decided not to follow the rules of the road and made a quick right turn. One of the guards wanted to continue the chase, but his fellow driver couldn't go through the red light. In the rearview mirror, the girl saw that her plan had worked after all, so she laughed wickedly. She wondered what to do now, and for starters, she wanted to tell the bodyguards about not worrying unnecessarily. The girl was so excited about this opportunity that she didn't notice that the silhouette of a crossdresser appeared right in front of her car. Luo Bi-yun had time to quickly react to the threat and hit the brake pedal. Also, a bright flash of light suddenly flew in front of her face, causing her to go blind for a moment and instinctively recoil. 6. It turned out to be a bullet that rattled through her car window, leaving a tear in the glass and showering the interior with shrapnel. The girl was shocked when she heard a gunshot and thought it was the same guy who jumped out in front of her car. Blood ran down her face because the bullet still grazed her delicate skin a bit. Though if she hadn't stopped, the consequences would have been worse. Luo Bi-yun was sure that these people here were clearly after her, so she should find a safe place and hide until the bodyguard found her. The girl turned sharply into a narrow alley and raced through the deserted streets, her footsteps echoing between the blank walls of the houses. She hoped this place would be safe until the bodyguards got here. At that moment, the defenseless beauty heard someone else's footsteps behind her back, which made her tense up. Luo Bi-yun heard that this person was walking quite calmly, so it must be just an ordinary passerby. In the end, it turned out to be Linmu, who was just passing by. The girl immediately recognized that it was the guy from the plane, because this mysterious gentleman could not be confused with anyone. She immediately grabbed the familiar man's hand and asked him to wait, because it was her only hope. The protagonist was surprised to ask what the miss wanted, and she was confused and couldn't answer accurately. In turn, the guy decided to make a joke and hinted that he did not need the services of a woman of easy behavior. Luo Bi-yun was greatly angered when she heard such words from a young man who was interested in her. The girl felt a hot wave of shame wash over her as she realized what a ridiculous misunderstanding had just occurred. Linmu was about to leave, but she shouted after him, telling the guy not to be in such a hurry. The young man raised his eyebrows in genuine surprise. his gaze expressing a mute question and misunderstanding. Luo Biyun lowered her gaze in embarrassment and tried to explain that she was being hunted by assassins, so she needed help. Now the main character understood the whole situation and agreed to help the girl to reach the police station, where she can be protected. It wasn't long before they approached the police station, and the guy suggested they hurry up. Linmu suggested that the girl go inside because in a situation like this, it was better to sit back in a safe place. She answered nothing and continued to follow the protagonist in silence. The protagonist didn't like the fact that the girl continued to pursue him, so glared at her with his disgruntled deadline. He asked what the problem was this time, and assumed that Lo Bi-yoon wanted something else. In fact, the girl still couldn't believe that the mysterious stranger from the plane didn't recognize her. Linmu didn't see it as a problem at all because he couldn't think of one, and was about to leave because he was a bit busy. The stunned beauty was indeed shocked because the young man didn't recognize her, and began to suspect that he was just trying to get out of here as quickly as possible. She realized that today's attack was too suspicious, so she couldn't tell the police about it, but rather put someone from the family in charge of dealing with it. Besides, the girl understood why our hero wanted to get rid of her quickly, because obviously he just didn't recognize her. In any case, Lo Bi-yoon wasn't going to fall behind so easily, so she pretended to be hungry and emphasized that she didn't have any money, hinting that the guy could help. The protagonist did not expect that the girl would not give up on him after all, so he finally decided to stop. He again asked the girl to go home or to the police station because she was definitely not allowed to walk around the city streets at night. In the end, Linmu headed towards his house that he had rented nearby. Lo Bi-yoon thought there was a restaurant somewhere nearby, not realizing where she was going. Then our hero, with a smile on his face, explained that he would take the defenseless girl to his house and make her some kind of snack. She was now convinced that the young man was not a bad person, but still felt that everything that was going on was beyond normal socializing. In any case, Luo Bi-yoon had nowhere to go, so she further followed the hospitable guy. Stepping inside and looking around the interior, she immediately noted that the main character had pretty good taste. Linmu immediately sat his guest down on the chair, but she continued to feel somehow awkward. Only now our hero noticed that the girl's feet were swollen, although she had not complained about it before. He realized that Luo Bi-yoon couldn't be left in this state, so he asked her to wait here while he looked for a solution to this problem. The girl was rather surprised when she saw what this caring young man was about to do. Turns out he brought her a basin of warm water, which was supposed to help with her swollen feet. Luo Bi-yoon was clearly feeling uncomfortable, so she didn't object, and immediately lowered her feet into the water. It was only now that she realized she had forgotten to introduce herself, so with a smile on her face, she said her name. In turn, the protagonist briefly replied that his name was Linmu. For now, he asked the girl to get some rest, while he himself went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for them. Luo Bi-yoon herself realized that the young man perceived her as an ordinary girl, and thought that knowing someone as ignorant and caring as him was pretty great. Linmu immediately noticed that she was looking at the plate very greedily, so he concluded that his guest must have been very hungry. The girl didn't even notice her stare, so she immediately tried to justify herself. The main character didn't judge her for it, so he just asked her to put on her slippers to finally go to the table to get something to eat. Luo Bi-yoon couldn't be happy that the guy was so caring that he even prepared house shoes for her. After sitting down at the table, Linmu explained that he had cooked the first thing that came to his mind and hoped that the girl would appreciate his efforts. The guest was pleased when she saw the bounty of treats that looked quite appetizing, so she was already anticipating a delicious dinner. Our hero was pleased to hear compliments, so he asked the girl to eat as much as she liked, since she liked it so much. Luo Bi-yoon realized that the atmosphere was already suitable to directly ask if the guy really didn't remember her. The young man sighed heavily and admitted that he really couldn't remember where they might have met. Then the girl decided to give a little hint and told him that it happened in Nangu City on an airplane. The image of one of the female passengers, who happened to be Luo Bi-yoon, immediately popped up in the guy's mind. She immediately laughed off the fact that Linmu was rather forgetful, because she hadn't changed much since then. The protagonist didn't mind and decided to wonder why the girl was being stalked by someone. She suspected it was all because of some work conflicts, but she was used to that kind of meanness by now. The guy had enough of this information to fully understand the whole situation, so he decided not to question Luo Bi-yoon anymore, and suggested that she finish her meal quickly so they could deal with her leg. After that, the girl herself also decided to end this conversation and continued her meal. After eating dinner, they went straight to examining the leg, and the main character immediately warned that they would need to be a little patient because it might hurt a little. Linmu was rubbing the place where his leg had been kicked, where by then a rather large bruise had already appeared. Luo Bi-yoon became very embarrassed because it all seemed rather strange, since they almost didn't know each other. Fortunately, the girl earned just a sprain, so her health was not in any danger. but it was still complicated by the fact that it was on the girl's leg. If not taken care of in time, the wound might affect Luo Biyun's walking, so our hero was willing to help, but it would all be too painful. The victim had already prepared herself to endure this pain, and the guy set about treating her. She was greatly surprised because she didn't feel any pain in the end, and thought that the main character was a professional doctor. The young man was obviously only a student, but the girl was still impressed with his skills. After that, she asked if she could use Linmu's bathroom, because she couldn't go back to her home like this. The protagonist didn't mind helping Lo Biyun and asked her to wait for a while. He even decided to bring clean clothes for his guest, so he retreated to another room. The guy brought his belongings and explained that he lived alone, so there were no women's clothes here. But in any case, Luo Biyun had little use for what was available. The girl had not expected such hospitality at all, and thanked Linmu for all this help. After that, she went to the bathroom, and the main character also brought her slippers and left them by the door so she wouldn't slip. After making sure the guest had everything they needed, the guy was finally able to mind his own business for a bit. The protagonist sat down on the couch and began to consider the spiritual ginseng that he had managed to snatch at the auction. He came to the conclusion that it was about time he figured out how to use this artifact. His musings were abruptly cut short when there was a persistent knock at the door. It was Luo Biyun, who had already finished all the water procedures and changed her clothes, so she was feeling quite fresh. The guy was a little stunned because he didn't expect the girl to be so suited to his clothes. The girl gave an embarrassed laugh and wondered what it was that was on the table. The protagonist briefly explained that it was just a medicinal herb that he was going to make a cure with. Luo Biyun was greatly surprised because she couldn't understand why such a young and healthy guy needed some medicinal herbs. Linmu pretended as if he had a weak body since childhood, so he had been using different medicines all his life. The girl immediately wanted to help because she knew some pretty good doctors, and suggested that the young man consult them. Apparently, he refused and explained that Chinese medicine would only worsen the situation, and Western doctors would definitely not help. The guy noticed that it was already quite late, so he suggested that Luo Biyun stay at his house because it was quite unsafe to get home alone. She did not refuse such an offer and immediately went to the guest room, advising the protagonist to go to bed soon too, to get a good night's rest. Finally, the young man turned toward the door and said goodnight to her in a quiet, calm voice. The next day, everyone woke up early in the morning to go about their business. The protagonist quickly got up from his bed and got ready to leave the house, but noticed that there were already 2 pairs of slippers near the door. He remained standing there, slightly puzzled, not expecting the girl to leave him so suddenly and even at such an early hour. At that moment, he smelled something pleasant, so he immediately went inside to see what it was. On the table in front of him, he saw a freshly cooked breakfast, and immediately noted that all this was not a cheap treat. Taking a closer look, Linmu noticed that there was a small note under one of the plates. It turned out that it was Lo Biyun, who left her number and explained that she had some business that caused her to have to leave so early. But she still wanted to thank her for her help and made a small breakfast. The protagonist quickly sat down at the table to appreciate the girl's efforts and thanked her aloud for all of this, despite the fact that he was here all alone. Cutting off a small piece, the guy stabbed it on his fork and put the food in his mouth. In fact, Linmu hadn't even expected that this entire breakfast would turn out to be so delicious. He had no idea at all that his new acquaintance had such good cooking skills. Finished with his morning snack, the protagonist decided to start making the medicine. In one of the lockers was a special cauldron that was meant for just such things. After throwing the ingredients inside, Linmu put the pot on the stove and the water in it boiled quite quickly. After that, he put ginseng root in it, which was the final ingredient. Meanwhile, events shift to Manhattan, where they have already learned about the recent incident with Lo Biyun. Her father was incredibly angry that the useless staff couldn't protect his daughter. The bodyguards understood everything perfectly well, so they apologized to their boss and emphasized that it was all their fault. It turns out that the subordinates had already managed to find the killer and the man behind it all, so one of them had already reached into the envelope to have a peek at this on his own. In fact, the man was more interested in who helped Luo Biyun evade her pursuers. The bodyguards had already prepared information about this guy too, so they started looking for an envelope with suitable data. The man was not in the least bit surprised when he read that it was Lin Mu from the Donghai Lin family. What shocked him even more was that this young man had died, but was eventually able to come back to life. The guards explained that they received this information from the hospital, which suggested that it was probably just the body's response to the temporary organ shutdown. But it was also known that after the patient woke up, he became taller and his appearance changed. Though more surprising was that his personality became completely different. The guard added that the hospital believes it is a miracle, and the first time such a thing has happened in the history of medicine. He allowed that such changes in the boy's appearance and character could have been due to memory loss. The man began to wonder about the main character's personality, so he inquired about the encounter with his daughter. The bodyguard said that they met 5 days ago when they were on the same plane to Nanhai City, and they also met on the day the girl was attacked, so it can already be said that they are friends. In the end, Father calmed down a bit because he realized that Luo Biyun was fine, but he also firmly added that from now on, he no longer wanted to hear that she was in danger. Hearing their boss's order, the guards turned around and headed towards the exit. For a while, the old man continued to sit with sheets of information about our hero and think about who he was. Meanwhile, the evening shadows lingered on the walls of Linmu's house, where events now continued to unfold. The preparation of the medicine was still going on, and the guy once again opened the lid to see how the process was going. He finally saw that the recipe had worked and everything was ready. Our hero quickly poured the medicine into another container, where it immediately solidified. After that, Linmu would twist small balls from this substance, although he could have done it with chi energy, but it was not enough even for such easy tasks. Of all this amount of medicine, the young man had quite a few medicinal pills. Eventually, the protagonist decided it was time to personally try his endeavors. Taking a sip of the medicine, the guy immediately felt some strange changes in his body. He realized that the effect was certainly a bit weak, but the number of pills just made up for it. Linmu realized that all was not well with Qi in this world. But with such great finances, there was nothing stopping him from rising to the top again. The next day, the guy, as if nothing had happened, went to study at the university. Tang Bay, who was sitting next to him, immediately noticed that the main character was sitting on his phone the whole time. So she immediately asked what it was that he was doing. Turns out, the young man was just looking at his grades for his last exam. Seeing the result, the girl immediately noted that the grades have not badly increased after our hero was in the hospital. So now she herself was not opposed to also fall from the balcony. Obviously, it wasn't the best idea, so I didn't advise her to go to such lengths for some sort of evaluation. One of her classmates also remarked that after this incident, everyone is talking about how lucky Linmu is. Du Xiaoyu was very annoyed because all the attention was tied to her ex-fiancé. So she asked her girlfriends not to react to it in any way. The sly girlfriend immediately reminded her that on paper the guy was still her fiancé, hinting that they could deal with this Tang Bay he keeps hanging around with. The girl continued to pretend as if she didn't care about all these papers, and said that she wasn't going to fume about some Linmu at all. At the same time, a rich beauty in a fancy sports car drove up to the university, who was just looking for our hero. Luo Bian was quite determined, so she quickly got out of the car and headed towards the entrance. Classmates immediately informed the guy that some unknown girl was looking for him. The protagonist immediately realized everything when he saw the acquaintance in front of him, and said hello to her, a little surprised. In turn, the girl smiled widely and laughed at the fact that he certainly hadn't expected to see her in such a place. It was true, so the young man confusedly asked how Luo Biyun knew about his university. The girl explained that she had just gotten a call from someone, and didn't even have to find her savior herself. The guy got embarrassed and apologized for being too busy lately, but really he had just forgotten about Luo Biyun. She immediately suspected something because the protagonist certainly didn't look that busy when he was having a word with his girlfriend. Linmu was not confused and explained that they had just finished a class they were just discussing. Luo Biyun didn't care about this at all because she came here to call our hero for a dinner that she would pay for on her own. The guy immediately refused and explained the subject that today was his grandfather's 80th birthday, which made him need to be home on time. At that time, the girl immediately guessed that there would be some kind of party and joined Linmu. The main character immediately explained that it wasn't a good idea because he had an oddball family, which made him afraid that Lo Biyun herself wouldn't like them either. She didn't see it as a problem at all and was confident that she could handle it all on her own. Eventually, the young man realized that it was useless to resist, so he explained that he had one more class left, after which they could go home together. Only now Lo Biyun was finally about to leave the audience, and asked our hero to unsubscribe when he was free. After that, Linmu looked around and was already certain that, fortunately, no one had paid attention to him. It turned out that everything was not like that because all classmates were already actively discussing the fact that the guy had a girl and so beautiful. The protagonist realized that the situation was too dire, so he decided to quickly run out of the auditorium to avoid answering all those stupid questions. He decided to go to the vending machine and grab a small snack for himself. Glad that he managed to escape in time, because otherwise he wouldn't know how to explain this whole situation. Suddenly, Tang Bei appeared behind his back, who was displeased that her friend had left without saying a single word. In fact, the guy didn't even have anything to say because he had only seen this girl twice, so they were just acquaintances. He said that the first time he and Lo Biyun met on an airplane and didn't even talk then, and the second time he met her in an alley near his house and saved her from some murders. The friend did not believe the words of the protagonist at all, because it was too strange due to the fact that the girl, after 2 meetings, personally came for him. She joked that Lo Bi-yoon could thank the savior with marriage, but the hero was against it, because the girl is from a famous family and such a thing is simply impossible. Tang Bay still saw no other reason for the girl to perfectly come to see the young man and act so friendly. The protagonist couldn't understand at all why his girlfriend cared so much about someone he knew. She immediately became very embarrassed and tried to explain that she was just worried about Linmu, because she was afraid that the pretty girl just might have deceived him. The guy immediately emphasized that he wasn't some infant who could be so easily fooled. He suggested that we finally go back to the auditorium because classes were about to start. Tang Bei was really annoyed that the main character was just trying to run away from her question, so she didn't get any normal answer. Meanwhile, the rest of the classmates continued to actively discuss the mysterious situation that had occurred during this break. Du Xiaoyu's friend still couldn't calm down because that girl directly approached Lin Mu and said that she was going to come to his grandfather's birthday party, which looked quite impertinent. The girl still continued to remain calm because she didn't want to show that she had any feelings for the head hero. Her friend couldn't believe that she wasn't even going to lift a finger despite some girl coming to Lin Mu's house. Du Xiaoyu wasn't going to do anything because now she had nothing to do with this guy, and besides, they were going to break the engagement anyway. The friends still thought it was like spitting in the girl's face because their breakup was still unconfirmed. In the end, Du Xiaoyue just asked her friends to calm down because it wasn't long before the teacher was going to come. After class, all the students quickly went out of the university to rest after a hard day's work. No sooner had the protagonist far away from the educational institution than someone beeped. It was Luo Bi-yoon, who was going to pick up the young man in her car from the beginning, so she waited for him at the exit. She also inquired if the guy had seen the car, because she wanted him to be the one behind the wheel. The protagonist didn't mind taking advantage of such an opportunity, so he quickly agreed. Eventually, the girl asked him to drive because she didn't know the road to his house at all. Quickly switching places, Linmu quickly pressed the gas pedal, and the car abruptly roared forward. Meanwhile, Luo Biyun, for some reason, abruptly leaned over and started scrutinizing something. Turns out the girl was rubbing the very leg she twisted the night they met the main character. Linmu immediately noticed that something was wrong, so he asked her about the condition of this bruise. Luo Biyun calmly replied that she was perfectly fine, and it was just a small sore from the heels. Then, the main character offered her to wear normal shoes, but the girl immediately refused because everything looked much prettier on heels and her legs seemed longer. He didn't understand at all this attitude of girls who suffered so much for the sake of some beauty. Luo Bi-yun explained, a little embarrassed, that normally she wouldn't wear such shoes, but today was a special day. The young man didn't understand the hint from her side at all, so he didn't react to those words at all. It wasn't long before they reached the Seven Ling Mansion, where all the relatives had already gathered to celebrate the birthday. The butler was overjoyed when he saw that young Master Mu had finally returned to their home. The protagonist said a brief hello to him, but was in no hurry to explain who he had come here with. The bewildered Uncle Chung had to inquire on his own who this girl was. The guy eventually explained that it was his friend named Lo Bi-yun, who he also decided to take to his grandfather's birthday party. The old man didn't object, so he welcomed Ms. Luo into their family's mansion with hospitality. The guy wasn't in much of a hurry to go in because he thought about what had happened here the last time he'd been home. He was looking at the balcony from which he had fallen off for unknown reasons, and afterward ended up in the hospital, where some rather mysterious changes in his body had taken place. Lobion immediately noticed that the protagonist was behaving strangely, so she asked what was wrong with him. The guy smiled to show that everything was fine and offered to hurry inside. Inside, they were greeted by a huge crowd of people chatting carefree about life. The girl walked confidently forward and immediately noted that the protagonist had quite a large home. Meanwhile, the other family members had already noticed that Lin Mu hadn't come here alone, but they couldn't figure out who his companion resembled. Eventually, some of the guests began to realize that it was the Luo family's madam herself. The man tensed up when he realized that the Luo family that owned Haoyu Corp was present here, and couldn't at all assume how his nephew would meet such a person. It turned out that Du Xiaoyue was also here, who was surprised when she realized that her fiancé was with Luo Bi-yun. The family members who wanted to get rid of the protagonist tensed up when they found out about his connection with the Lo family. They began to suspect that all their hard work would now go down the drain because of the interference of such powerful people. The first to decide to speak was the aunt, who pretended that she was glad to see her nephew. She wondered why on earth the guy had walked into their party so late. Lin Mu briefly explained that he had a class, after which he had come here as fast as he could. After the guy's explanation, the woman went straight to greeting the Luo family representative because she never thought that the girl would come to their father's 80th birthday party. Luo Biyun was embarrassed by this politeness and explained that she didn't come here as a representative of Hao Yu Corp, but as a friend of Linmu. The aunt explained that, regardless of any reason, their family was happy for the girl's visit. The protagonist interrupted their amiable conversations and wondered where Grandpa was because he still hadn't seen him. The woman suspected that after the incident, he had forgotten that his grandfather had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, so the head of the family was no longer able to attend such events. Anyway, the guy was going to talk to his grandfather, so he left all his relatives and guests, and Luo Bi-yun followed him. One of the brothers inquired if their sister had managed to find out anything from the daughter of the owner of Hao Yu Corp. Auntie thought that this girl was definitely not that simple, so it was impossible to find anything related to her for now. The man then inquired as to what this girl had in common with their nephew, but the sister was clueless, though she was definitely sure that they were not dating. Meanwhile, the protagonist had already entered his grandfather's room and announced that he had come home. The head of the family was already too weak, so he needed servants even just to eat. Grandpa's gaze was rather blank, so he just mechanically opened his mouth to be fed. Suddenly he twitched and grabbed the servant's hand as if he didn't want to eat anymore. Only now did the subordinate see that young Master Mu had entered the room, causing her to be a bit confused. The boy calmly released the servant and explained that he just wanted to talk to his grandfather. The worker understood everything perfectly well, so she quickly headed towards the exit. Linmu squatted down in front of his grandfather and immediately wished him a happy birthday. Taking the old man's hands, our hero asked if he remembered his grandson, hoping to rekindle at least a spark of memory in his eyes. Through force, Grandpa still remembered that his favorite grandchild Mu was standing in front of him. At this point in the conversation, Luo Bi-yun intervened and smilingly wished Mr. Lin a long life and remarked that he would definitely last longer than the South China Mountains. The main character revealed that it was a friend he had taken to help celebrate her birthday. Grandpa still seemed to be hovering in the clouds, so he didn't say many words and only occasionally nodded back smiling. He grabbed his grandson's hand sharply again, but he also remained silent. Linmu understood perfectly well what the situation was, so he just continued to watch the old man. At this moment, a servant came into the room and informed the young master that the celebration was about to start, and Du Xiaoyue was waiting for him to come down. Our hero was rather surprised when he heard that name, so he hurriedly went to see what was going on and left his grandfather to the worker. She went quickly out into the hall, where his so-called bride was waiting for him, who did not seem pleased with his absence. Linmu finally found a moment to directly ask the girl what she was forgetting here. It turns out that Du Xiaoyu's grandfather asked her to attend the event and present a gift from them. She summoned her assistant, who held up a vase that looked very expensive, and briefly introduced the gift from the Du family. It was an authentic flower-painted vase from the period of Chinese Emperor Yongjin. All the guests immediately noticed this rare treasure and began to marvel that Old Man Du was indeed an incredible person, because a gift like this was worth at least several tens of millions. Our hero thanked their family for such a generous gesture, but refused to accept the vase because it was too expensive for their family. Du Xiaoyu irritably reminded that she was still the young man's fiancée, so it was normal for her to give such gifts. Guy thought that Ms. Du had also fallen off the balcony, because she now started talking about the engagement in complete seriousness. The girl once again emphasized that the engagement was planned by the heads of their families, so it has not yet been officially dissolved. Now the protagonist realized that he had made a serious mistake. He realized that if only he had broken off the engagement earlier, then Miss Du could have taken it easy and not come to the party. The guests were visibly shocked by such news, and immediately started discussing who could have broken off the engagement, suspecting that it was definitely not Old Man Lin who had Alzheimer's. Then the aunt intervened in this conversation and inquired what was going on here, and why the young man wanted to dissolve this union. Our hero explained without any nerves that Miss Du thinks he's too bad for her, which is why she's asked him many times to break off the engagement. Of course, Du Xiaoyu's grandfather didn't want to talk about it either, but that wasn't a problem because Lin Mu was going to personally talk to him. The girl was quite tense, but replied that it would be as her fiancé wished. At the same time, Lo Biyun announced that she had also prepared a gift for her grandfather, hoping that he would like it. The protagonist immediately said that the girl definitely shouldn't have spent any money on it. He carefully picked up the mysterious box, which gave no hint of what was inside. The guest was eagerly watching the young man, because she was eager to see the reaction to what she had prepared for the birthday boy. In the end, Lin Mu still opened the wooden box and saw a ring in front of him that was made of a green gemstone. The guy's eye was trained on this sort of thing, so he immediately recognized it for what it was. The girl still decided to explain on her own and revealed that it was a ring made from the best jade called Qiyue Yang. Du Xiaoyu noted that the stone was pretty good, but in any case, they couldn't be sure that the ring was real. Luo Biyun realized that she had a keen eye that could determine the quality of the jade so easily. The girl still thought that the ring must be real because it was unlikely that anyone would dare to deceive the Luo family. Du Xiaoyu decided to finally leave her rival alone and congratulated Grandpa Lin on such an incredible gift. The protagonist, despite the tense situation, smiled and thanked the guests for being so generous. He eventually accepted the gift from Du's family on behalf of his grandfather, but warned that next time he would come to discuss breaking off the engagement, and she shouldn't waste any more time on such events. Du Xiaoyu was clearly irritated by the situation, her lips tightly pressed together, and she only nodded briefly in response, showing that she had no intention of continuing this conversation. The aunt finally intervened, who couldn't understand how her nephew could make such decisions on his own. The guy explained that nothing would work out between them, even if you do it through force. So it was easier to break the engagement to avoid wasting their nerves and time. Aunt Ron realized that the protagonist was serious, so she backed off and didn't bother to change his mind. After the party, Linmu was back in his acquaintance's car and had already driven away from his family's house. The girl decided to talk about how this Du Xiaoyue is quite beautiful, so the guy should think about whether he will regret breaking the engagement. The protagonist didn't see this as a problem because his fiancée doesn't want to waste time on him, so her beauty and intelligence no longer matter. Luo Biyun still suggested that he stay with the girl longer to find out her feelings, and maybe then his feelings wouldn't change. But in any case, Linmu wasn't burning with the desire to marry her specifically, so he refused. Also, the lad, glancing at his companion, added that he was not the kind of man who would pursue something that did not belong to him, leaving behind what was at his fingertips. The girl laughed and noted that Linmu had a boneless tongue since he spoke of such things so easily. It wasn't long before she informed young Master Mu that they had arrived at the right place. Our hero quickly jumped out of the car and started actively typing something into his phone. The next second, there was a ringing notification sound from Luo Biyun's phone. Lin Mu handed her his phone number and asked her to call if the girl needed help again. Luo Biyun said goodbye to the protagonist with a smile on her face, showing with all her appearance how much she appreciated this meeting and how happy she was about the circumstances. She then quickly drove off in the direction of her home, so the young man didn't even have time to respond. Lin Mu was in no hurry to go inside and began to actively dig through the pocket of his jacket. Turns out his grandfather handed him a note telling him not to worry about him, because the old man was only pretending to have Alzheimer's, so he wouldn't have to mess around with all the family members fighting over the inheritance. The protagonist did not expect that the head of their family had come up with such a cunning plan for himself. The next day, the guy immediately went to the Du family's resort to solve his main problem. He was met at the entrance to the liner by two guards who were in no particular hurry to let the stranger into their master's territory. The guy explained that he was from the Lin family, asking to be let through so he could talk to Grandpa Du. The guard immediately informed his other colleagues that the young man was alone. Eventually, they allowed our hero to pass and informed him that an elderly master was already waiting for him inside. Smiling, Linmu thanked the guards for the opportunity to talk to their inflammation. He quickly walked up the steps that led to the Du family's huge liner. There were already quite a few people resting by the pool. Among them was Grandpa Du himself, whom the guy was looking for. The old man, who was lounging on a chaise longue and sunbathing, said hello to the protagonist and wondered why he was looking for him. Linmu was going to state everything briefly, so he immediately asked if the master was close to his granddaughter Du Xiaoyue. Grandpa immediately tensed up because he thought something had happened to the girl. The young man tried to calm him down because nothing much was going on and told him directly that she just wasn't very happy with the engagement. Mr. Du accounts that it was quite normal for children to quarrel, so he asked Lin Mu not to take it all seriously. The protagonist still thought that they were simple people. So if Du Xiaoyue didn't want it, he wasn't going to waste her time anymore. One of the Du family was displeased with the kid's audacity, since he decided to make such a cocky decision on his own. Grandfather immediately intervened in this conflict and ordered the man to shut up and not speak to Lin Mu in such a tone. All the guests on the liner immediately fell silent, because they did not expect the head of the family to be so tough. In the end, the old man once again questioned whether the boy had really come here specifically to break off the engagement. The protagonist confidently confirmed his intentions and emphasized that after this, he and Du Xiaoyue would become mere strangers. Mr. Du, realizing the futility of further resistance, sighed heavily and finally agreed to dissolve the alliance. The guy thanked him for the opportunity and promised to take all the blame, so he was about to leave so as not to take up any more of the old man's time. He quickly turned around and dryly said goodbye to the entire Du family, who definitely didn't expect this turn of events. No one could understand why the master had let this breakup happen so quietly, and they were afraid that rumors about it would spread quickly. Was unhappy that someone was trying to oppose his decision because it definitely didn't concern the ordinary family members. And besides, he would know about all their dealings with the Luo family. The man believed that the Luo family was much stronger than the Lin family, so if Xiao Yue married any of them, it would help their family quite a bit. Mr. Du himself also understood all of this, so when the engagement had already been broken off, there was no point in hiding anything. Meanwhile, the protagonist went downtown, after meeting his former father-in-law. In the middle of a busy street, Linmu was lucky enough to meet his teacher, Miss Song. The young man was happy about this coincidence, so he decided to help the teacher carry her bags. The girl rejoiced at this sudden good fortune, and was not averse to handing over the burden to her apprentice. Linmu immediately noticed that she was carrying some sort of gift, so he decided to inquire about who was having a birthday. It turned out that Song Liangju herself was having the celebration, so the protagonist thought she was going to celebrate alone. The teacher dismissed his speculation because she wanted to get together with her neighbors, so she invited our hero to this celebration as well. The young man didn't seem to have expected such a suggestion from Ms. Song at all, so he was confused and didn't know how to answer. Suddenly, Lee Guangju, who was accompanied by his bodyguards, intervened in their conversation. He couldn't understand how Song Liangju could be so bored on her birthday, so he suggested that she throw a real celebration. The girl calmly replied that there was no need for that, because she had already found herself some people to celebrate the day with. Li Guangyu suspected she was talking about her friend Zixi, so he offered to take her along, and added that birthdays are very important in Korea. Song Liangju wasn't going to fall for his silly tricks, because she was Chinese, and she wasn't interested in Korean traditions. At that moment, she turned around and saw that one of the guards had already blocked her way. The girl tensed up when she saw such maneuvers, and asked Li Guangju what it all meant. Her acquaintance only grinned enigmatically, leaving this agitated question unanswered. He had been searching for Song Liangru for a very long time, and had put a lot of effort into it. So now he couldn't understand why she wouldn't give him any chance. It was hard for the guy to believe that she was going to choose some weakling over him. The protagonist was outraged that he was also involved in this fight, even though it didn't concern him in any way. And Song Liangru herself said that compared to Lin Mu, Li Guangju was just trash. The cocky suitor wasn't going to give up anyway, because the only reason he was putting up with all this was because he liked the girl. He asked our hero not to dream of any relationship because it's as if Song Liangju will just dump him as soon as she no longer needs him. The girl was unhappy that her acquaintance was behaving so inappropriately and asked him to stop slandering her. The guy didn't see any problem at all with her words because he was sure that she would definitely ditch Lin Mu sooner or later. Song Liangru asked her acquaintance to leave amicably because otherwise she wouldn't let him get away with such a prank. Li Guangju stood with an arrogant grin because he was sure that the girl definitely couldn't beat him. The girl could not stand it and tried to hit her acquaintance, but he managed to dodge in time. The young man liked that kind of fervor, so he suggested that the beauty try again so he could give her a couple tips. Now the main character realized that it's not so easy to be a good guy, because he just helped to carry things, and in the end he already got into some trouble. One of the bodyguards decided that they didn't need to waste any more time on some weakling and attacked Lin Mu. The protagonist expected such a development, so he carefully watched the movements of his opponent. Eventually, the guy managed to react in time, so he successfully punched his opponent right in the face. Even such an experienced fighter could not resist the strength of our hero, so he fell to the floor without strength. His comrade flew after him as well, whom Linmu also neutralized with one precise strike. In the end, the young man remained unharmed, while all his opponents were lying helplessly on the ground. Song Liangrao didn't expect to see such a turn of events, so she fearfully asked if our hero was fine. The protagonist began to tell with a smile that he saw the two men surround him, but after blinking once, he had already witnessed these fighters lying on the ground. The guy lied that he must have been rescued by some master, but Mrs. Song had a hard time believing it because she didn't see anyone nearby. In any case, she was happy for Linmu being fine, so any details didn't bother her. At this moment, the bald bodyguard tried to stand up and report that the person who beat them up was definitely the young man himself. Our hero did not want to reveal his skills, so with all his might he stepped on the hand of the defeated opponent, so that he did not say too much. Meanwhile, Song Liangju asked the guy to hurry up and leave this place because her mood had gotten really bad because of all these people. In turn, Lee Guangju wasn't going to let them go so easily because Lin Mu dared to injure his men. The girl was sure that his bodyguards were injured through no fault of their own, so she suggested that her acquaintance look for the master who had done all this to them. The guy despised professionals because they only knew how to hide like rats, and wanted to see if he could find someone to save them again. The protagonist felt that the situation was starting to heat up, so he tensely looked at Li Guangju, who was in no way able to keep up with them. Song Liangju sensed this tension and immediately stopped her disciple because his potential opponent was too dangerous, as he had already won many taekwondo competitions and was quite strong. Meanwhile, Lee Guangju kept trying to hurt our hero, calling him a lowlife who can only hide behind his skirt. The protagonist couldn't afford to stand on the sidelines because that way he would lose his dignity. So he was going to play a little game with his opponent. He turned to Lee Guangyu with confidence in his voice and offered to see what he was capable of. The guy himself was glad that Linmu had the courage to accept such a challenge. Linmu wanted to get this whole conflict over with quickly and see if his opponent's words matched his real abilities. Lee Guangju didn't wait any longer and accelerated sharply to suddenly attack our hero. He felt that now the protagonist should just beg for mercy, because Lin Mu simply wouldn't be able to resist his incredible strength. Song Liangru realized that there was no way she could help her student, so she remained standing back and simply asked him to be careful. The guy could already see that his opponent was not at all like some other weakling. In any case, the protagonist thought that Li Guangju was hoping in vain if he really thought that this fight would be so easy. But the guy was still absolutely confident in his strength. So he continued to attack Lin Mu, who had managed to dodge so far. Eventually, the protagonist managed to block even a strong leg kick and keep his balance. An interested smirk appeared on Li Guangju's face because he didn't expect the young man to even be able to block his turning kick. He paused for a while and wondered what the protagonist was going to do now, because he was definitely not in a particularly favorable situation. Song Liangro could clearly see how strong the blow was, so now she wasn't sure if her disciple was fine. Li Guangju himself was surprised by this outcome because he could have calmly broken the board with his punches, but the protagonist somehow managed to withstand. Meanwhile, Lin Mu replied that he was fine, but he didn't even expect his opponent to be this good. The teacher noticed that the young man was holding up quite well, so she asked him when he had managed to become so strong, and he told her that it was after he was discharged, when he realized his weakness. Li Guangju decided to take advantage of the guy being distracted by the conversation and tried to attack him a second time. It seems that the protagonist had long been prepared for this turn of events, so he put his two hands forward. His opponent immediately noticed this maneuver on his part and thought the guy would try to grab his leg. He simply couldn't let Lin Mu do something like this. So a solution to the problem had to be found right here and now. The guy in flight changed his attacking foot, trying to attack the protagonist from the side he didn't have time to defend. Song Liangro was not too scared because she thought that Lin Mu had come to an end. The guy actually had a very good reaction, so even in such a desperate situation, he managed to dodge. Eventually, he managed to put his plan into action and successfully grabbed his overconfident opponent's leg. Lin Mu was very angry at this guy, so he decided to teach him a lesson for being so impertinent. He twisted Song Liangru's foot with all his might and then heard a rather unpleasant crunch. Feeling this unbearable pain, even such a strong fighter shrilly screamed. Lastly, the protagonist advised Li Guangju not to try to make moves he couldn't do, because it would only make him look like a complete fool. Those were his last words, after which he walked over to Ms. Sleep, and together they walked away from the humiliated weakling. When they were back on the main street, the teacher admitted that she had not expected this turn of events. She marveled that Lin Mu had gotten so strong in just a few months, and our hero said it was all just for his health. Song Liangru had been haunted by the feeling that she was talking to a completely different person the entire time, adding that the guy had only gotten better. She immediately remembered that her roommate was also very good at martial arts. The protagonist guessed that Ms. Song was talking about Zixi, who Li Guangju had mentioned earlier. Then the teacher decided to reveal that her friend has been practicing since she was a child. So she uses the sword as if it were an extension of her arm. The guy realized that she was quite good, so he inquired about what such professionals did. But Song Liangju didn't know any details. In the end, she herself suggested that Lin Mu have tea together because the neighbor was just at home. The protagonist declined because he still had some business to attend to and wished them a good time. The guy said goodbye and was about to leave, but Song Liangru lastly told him to make sure to stop by next time. Lin Mu was calmly walking through the streets of the city when he heard the sounds of a chase behind him. It turns out that some thief had dared to steal a bag in broad daylight and was now trying to escape prosecution. The villain wasn't going to give up so easily, so he yelled for everyone to disperse and give him his way. He tried to quickly run across the road, in the middle of which a police car had just stopped. A female law enforcement officer immediately jumped out of the car and attempted to apprehend the man who was so desperately trying to flee the scene of his crime. The thief tried to jump over the fence, but in the end his foot slipped unsuccessfully. As a result, he fell to the ground and dropped with a clatter the very bag he was so eager to steal. The policewoman immediately jumped over the fence so as not to miss the opportunity to capture the villain. She emphasized in a cold, stern voice that any resistance was futile. The thief unhappily clucked his tongue because he realized he had no more avenue of retreat. Eventually, the man pulled a knife from his pocket and began threatening the girl who tried to restrain him. The police officer ordered him to stop resisting because assaulting an officer is a serious offense. The man thought he wasn't a thief until he was caught, so he could do whatever he wanted. But backup was on the way, so it would be hard for him to evade the police. The officer said that if he did surrender voluntarily, she would pretend that the offender had not assaulted her. The girl wasn't going to give up so easily anyway, so the girl could only dream of such a thing. She realized that the situation with this intruder was too complicated, so he was leaving her no other choice. The policewoman was about to apprehend the bandit, but he started waving his knife at her to stop her from approaching. The girl acted quite professionally, so she quickly grabbed the thief by the arm and immobilized him. As she pawed and laid the man on the ground, she emphasized that he had a choice before that. She asked why the whole situation was made more complicated, because now the violator had earned himself another non-compliance with the law. Suddenly, someone else put his foot down on the policewoman and emphasized that it was better for the woman to stay out of these matters. The police officer then immediately realized that someone had come to the aid of the bandit. She had pretty good physical fitness, so she managed to dodge in time. Now the policewoman understood that it was this gangster organization that had it all together. One of the men said that there are some things you should just turn a blind eye to, so a girl better not seriously look for trouble on her day off. She, as a police officer, was outraged by this sort of thing because she couldn't just let criminals go. The bandit was annoyed that the girl was so stubborn, so he decided to deal with her. The policewoman was able to dodge the first blow, and then realized something was wrong. She stumbled helplessly against the fence and realized she had nowhere else to dodge. Meanwhile, the bandit had already pulled out a knife and rushed towards the girl to finish her off sooner. At this point, someone stopped the villain and pointed out that everyone makes mistakes, so you should forgive them if possible. It turned out to be the protagonist who felt that there was no need to resort to sacrifice during a routine robbery. In the end, the bandit agreed with him and decided to forgive the girl this time, emphasizing that she should stay out of other people's business next time. Linmu was glad that he had solved this problem so easily. Staring at the departing bandits, the guy didn't even notice that the police officer had already handcuffed him. The protagonist couldn't understand at all what it was all about, and the girl explained that he needed to fully realize what he had just done. The guy still didn't see the problem either because all he wanted to do was help a cop who was in trouble. In turn, the girl absolutely refused to believe that Linmu was not familiar with these criminals. The protagonist was annoyed by this attitude towards him because he really saw these people for the first time, but still didn't trust because the bandits obeyed him so easily. Linmu still didn't understand anything because he was sure that the bandits had only left because they wouldn't be able to defeat him in a fight. The policewoman was not at all sure that the young man could defeat 3 robbers, so she was still going to take him to the station and write a report to clear up the whole situation. The guy began to realize that the situation was quite serious, so he got nervous because he still had a considerable amount of important plans left, which were literally destroyed in a second. At that moment, another police car pulled up beside them, from where another officer got out and immediately recognized Officer Wang. The young man realized that she was the one calling for backup and saw that his colleague had managed to handle the perpetrator herself. Then the girl explained that it wasn't the same robber, but there were suspicions that this particular guy might have been an acquaintance of the bandits. The officer agreed to help her and take the perpetrator to the station himself, and Ms. Wang herself was to return to the office. At this point, the policewoman was a little embarrassed because she still needed help getting into the car because she had managed to twist her ankle during the contraction. Putting our hero in the car, the guy quickly rushed to help his coworker. He immediately noted that the girl was rather clumsy, tried to explain that things had accidentally gotten out of hand. Suddenly, Ms. Wang froze in place because she saw something shocking. It turned out that Linmu had managed to get out of the handcuffs, so he was no longer in the car. Now the police officers began to doubt that the protagonist was an ordinary man. In turn, the guy himself was thinking that he shouldn't have been prying after all, when he heard someone call out to him. The protagonist was greatly surprised because he saw that it was Ms. Sleep, who should have been home a long time ago. The girl explained that she had forgotten to buy some condiments, so she went out to get them, and suggested that Linmu take a walk together and then come over to visit with her friend. In the end, he agreed because it was the best choice for hiding from the police. Pretty soon, they had already gone to the store and returned home, where Zixi was already waiting for them, surprised that they had managed so easily. One of the girls remarked that Song Liangju had found such a cool seasoning and asked what the name of this beautiful young man was. Another friend asked Zixi not to be so persistent because she might scare away such a handsome man. The main character said hello and said with a smile that he was glad to have this meeting. The girls couldn't wait any longer, so they asked their friend to introduce them as soon as possible, before she finally introduced Linmu, briefly calling him her disciple. Zixi guessed that this young man was the teacher's favorite since she had invited him home. Song Liangru then revealed that this guy had helped her teach Lee Guangju a lesson, so she called him over to thank him for such a favor. One of the girls was surprised by this fact because she still didn't know that Lee Guangju had taken up again. Zishi asked if she could call our hero Amu, and said that their acquaintance, although he was a scoundrel, but in battle he knew no equal. The protagonist took a seat next to him and noted that his abilities were definitely not comparable to the very girl he had already heard a lot about. Zixi guessed that her friend had already told her about her powers, because otherwise the guy himself hadn't guessed about her powers. She also hinted that an acquaintance of theirs named Mengshuan was currently abroad, so they had a spare room in the house. Linmu definitely didn't expect to be asked to move so quickly, but he had already found a place to live, so there was no need for him to do so. The girl still offered to let our hero take the room downstairs and help all the others move things upstairs if needed. Song Liangju agreed with her friends and asked the guy to stay here to live and help each other. Since the girlfriends were so insistent, the protagonist decided to accept their sudden offer. He had been warned right away that the second floor was for girls only, so it was forbidden to enter without permission. Also, the guy should clean up after himself and always wash the dishes if they eat together. Linmu was starting to get tense with so many rules, but Zixi explained that there weren't that many and asked her new neighbor to listen carefully to all the details. Eventually, the girl finished listing all the rules and suggested we finally get to the celebration. Everyone remembered that they had gathered at this place to celebrate Song Liangju's birthday. 2 days later, the guy had already realized that it was pretty difficult with girls, and going shopping already seemed like a hassle. After a while, the protagonist was finally able to pack all the packages into the trunk of his car. At this moment, someone behind his back rejoiced at such an unexpected encounter. So Lin Mu turned around in surprise. Turns out it was the same policewoman who was already jingling the handcuffs in her hands. The young man noted confusedly that he really hadn't expected to meet the officer. At this point, the protagonist found a way to get away from the police officer and pretended that there was something amazing behind her back. The policewoman was very inattentive and fell for such a stupid ploy from Lin Mu. It turned out that the guy had already disappeared somewhere, so the girl shouted indignantly to the whole street. At the last second, she noticed the protagonist trying to flee the scene on his bike. The policewoman quickly sat down in her squad car and set off in pursuit of Lin Mu, who was driving quite fast. For her part, Song Liangru couldn't understand where Lin Mu had disappeared to so suddenly. At that moment, a cute couple was walking down the sidewalk, completely unaware of what was in store for them. A girl was walking with her lover and carelessly telling some life story when someone whizzed by nearby. She couldn't figure out what it was, and then she noticed that her ice cream had gone somewhere. They further witnessed a police car chasing this unknown object at full speed. The guy couldn't understand at all what was going on, because he had never witnessed a bicycle being chased by the police before. Meanwhile, the protagonist was highly annoyed that this female police officer was so stubborn and restless. He also realized that at this rate, the tires on his vehicle wouldn't last long. Linmu realized that he needed to look for alternative ways to retreat, and saw an inconspicuous alley nearby that was suitable for this. It turned out that the policewoman was closely following the young man's actions, so she reacted in time and swerved. A smirk immediately appeared on the girl's face because she was sure that the guy would definitely not be able to hide from her. The protagonist did not suspect at all that his plan had failed, and calmly walked down the street, rejoicing that he had managed to escape from this madwoman. Within a second, he heard a distinctive click and felt the cold metal of the handcuffs around his wrists. The young man directly admitted that the officer really got to him because she had been chasing him for such a long time. The police officer herself did not see this as a problem because she merely wanted to bring the escaped felon to the station. Our hero was still trying to prove that he hadn't done anything illegal and yelled that there was a robbery going on right behind the officer's back. The girl wasn't going to fall for Lin Mu's tricks a second time, but he spoke in complete seriousness. She promised that the young man would be a corpse if he fooled her again, but she still believed it because she heard a noise and shouting nearby. The police officer asked the protagonist to wait here while she checked to see what was going on. Obviously, the protagonist was not going to obey the girl, so he immediately tried to get out of the handcuffs. He was about to leave, but heard that the criminal had already taken a hostage. Eventually, the guy got interested in the whole situation because he hadn't yet seen a robber cover himself with hostages. A considerable number of people had already gathered in the shopping center, not knowing what to do in such a situation, and the robber threatened to shoot the defenseless man he managed to grab. As the protagonist got closer, he saw that the robber had captured a policeman, but people in the crowd told him that he used to have a little girl in his hands, with whom this brave girl had switched. Linmu was surprised because he didn't expect that the officer had such a good heart that she sacrificed herself for the child. The policewoman continued to keep her cool and ordered Lan Zidong to stop because he was already surrounded. The man was not going to give up and ordered everyone to fail and prepare a car for him because otherwise his hostage would die. The protagonist began to get annoyed with the whole situation because there was too much noise from this criminal. Suddenly, he just plopped down on the floor right in the middle of the crowd, causing the bandit to immediately look away from voicing his conditions. Linmu didn't bother to explain anything and carefully fixed his hair before continuing with his plan. The policewoman was shocked when she saw the guy and asked him to get out of here as soon as possible because it was too dangerous. It turns out that our hero decided to pretend that he had always been a fan of Brother Lan and wanted to give him some sort of gift. At this moment, a woman in the crowd indignantly shouted that Linmu had stolen her bag. The young man paid no attention to her and continued to talk about how the bandit was his idol, and ever since he was a kid, he wanted to be like him. The officer was incredibly angry at the fact that the protagonist was behaving in such a manner, and now she was sure that nothing good could be expected from him. Linmu roughly gagged the girl and emphasized that he was now talking to Brother Lan, so she had no right to interfere in the conversation. The man started to get stressed out by our hero's nonsense, so he asked to get him a car and offered to talk when they left the scene. The guy quickly started running errands from the thug and remembered that the policewoman's car was just parked somewhere nearby. Eventually, he took his time going outside and reported that there was a sniper nearby. The criminal was shocked by this information and once again questioned what the protagonist had just said. He finally looked around and saw that the young man had actually lied to him, and there were no snipers nearby. Meanwhile, the main character took the opportunity that he had distracted the bandit and threw me his bag. Lan Zedong managed to react to this sudden attack in time and put out his hand, knocking the bag away. He decided to immediately fire his gun, but there was a misfire, so Linmu remained unharmed. The guy's reactions were perfect, so he quickly went low and grabbed his opponent's arm. After that, he turned around and gave the bandit in the head from the elbow, so he could no longer stay on his feet. The world around Lan Zedong abruptly spun, and in just a second, he was on the ground. Our hero then promptly clobbered the criminal, who now promised to finish him off at the first opportunity. In turn, the policewoman was already too angry, so she declared that she had had enough today and was going to deal with this annoying intruder right here and now. The protagonist turned to her and asked her to give the purse to the lady he had managed to rob because his hands were full for the time being. The girl didn't mind and quickly began to gather up all the things that were scattered around. Lan Zedong, who had already been received by the two police officers, was incredibly angry at being treated in this manner, so he was already thinking of a revenge plan. An hour later, Linmu had already returned home to his new roommates, who were completely unaware of what had happened to him. He was met at the doorstep by Song Liangju, who immediately asked where the guy had disappeared to so suddenly. The protagonist sighed heavily and replied that he just didn't want to talk about it because he hadn't had much luck lately. The girls still did not calm down because they were worried about the fate of their friend. Well, the one explained that nothing special had happened to him. As he walked further along, the young man noticed that his friend was watching some concert on TV, and they told him that they really wanted to go there, but tickets were very hard to get. At this moment, Zixi noticed that the protagonist had finally returned, wondering if he was going to apologize for his sudden disappearance. Linmu was well aware that he had no choice, so he promised to definitely redeem himself. He asked his acquaintances to wait a little while he stepped away to make one important call. The girls were surprised that our hero had just returned and he had some problems again, but the guy promised to tell everything later. Zixi was no longer sure that this young man was an ordinary student because he was acting too mysterious. Song Liangju agreed with her friend and noted that he seemed too masculine for his years, but the girl thought that wasn't his only oddity. As it turned out, the guy had already made arrangements for Yao Xianxian's concert and hoped his girlfriends had free time for him in 3 days. Zixi was overjoyed at this news and wondered how he had managed to get tickets. The protagonist didn't give details about Old Man Wang helping him, and briefly explained that he had some connections. The next day, the whole company went to an establishment to grab a bite to eat together. Linmu immediately noticed that this place was suspiciously quiet today. In turn, the friends were surprised that their acquaintance also came to the cafeteria today. The girl immediately felt someone else's gaze on her, so she turned sharply towards the company of friends. Suddenly, the protagonist looked closer and felt that there was chi energy lurking in her chest, which literally shocked him. The guy definitely didn't expect to meet another cultivator in a place like this. Zixi thought that he had such an eye for the girl because of her beauty, and the man confirmed it, adding that aside from all that, the stranger was rather calm. The girl didn't seem to like this description of this mysterious beauty, so she stepped on Linmu's foot with all her might. The young man did not expect to feel such a sharp pain at all, so he asked fearfully why he deserved such a punishment. Zixi irritably explained that it was as if our hero's eyes were already starting to pop out, and asked him to hurry up and get them something to eat. Linmu began to guess that this girl had somehow hurt his friend, but she didn't want to say anything. Song Lingju also said that she didn't know anything about this stranger, So our hero was only left to get lost in his speculation. In fact, the teacher thought that the young man had managed to fall in love with her at first sight. Linmu then explained that this girl just seemed somehow familiar to him, and there was also some special aura around her. Ms. Song was not impressed by all these words at all, so she only sighed unhappily. The protagonist realized that the situation was heating up, so he quickly took out the front row seat tickets for Yao Xianxian's concert tonight from his pocket. The girls quickly grabbed their gift and forgave the young man this time after all. A smile immediately appeared on Song Liangju's face, and she promised to take all her friends to the concert after class. It wasn't long before they arrived at the venue, where a good number of fans had gathered. The girls didn't expect Lin Mu to get such fancy places for them at all. They all admired Yao Xianxian because it felt like there were only more than 1,000 police officers patrolling the concert here. To Zixi, this fact was obvious because this singer was a real star. Of the entire crowd, only our hero had no idea whose concert they were attending. At that second, the very girl whose exit everyone had been waiting for appeared on the stage. She greeted all her fans with a smile and said that she was very happy to perform here in Dunhai.